It is an incredible story.
My daughter convicted from this morning.
And I've watched it unfold.
The FBI has now joined dozens of local police in this missing persons investigation.
This was an all-American family. I knew that story was big. The national media was there. All the locals were there. It became a show. It became a spectacle, really.
I had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance.
She was a pregnant mother in a relationship with a man that she adored.
2 bodies found in the bay are those of Lacey Peterson and her baby.
The prosecution told us Scott kills Lacey, Scott dumps Lacey in the bay.
I'm convinced that he's innocent.
He's not a guy that would kill a woman. There was critical evidence that was never presented to Scott's jury. Could have been the key to everything. Could have led us to the murder.
After serving 14 years on death row, Scott Peterson has filed an appeal. Could he get out?
It's clearly not over for Scott Peterson.
That's correct, John. I'm innocent.
Scott killed Lacey. There was no doubt about that.
Did Scott maybe do it, probably do it, could have done it, must have done it? Maybe, but not beyond a reasonable doubt. Scott Peterson did not get a fair trial.
It was December 24th, 2002. Everybody's getting ready for Christmas. Families are gathering, getting ready to open gifts. And then suddenly, the Modesto Police Department gets a call saying Lacey Peterson, a woman who's 8 months pregnant, is missing.
Yeah, my daughter convicted from this morning. She's 8 months pregnant. She took her dog for a walk in the park. The dog came home with just police shots. Jesus, I can't believe it.
And the dog came back without your daughter?
Right.
What is your name?
My name is Ron. Except that her husband, Scott Peterson, is all over the park.
What's your sister's name?
Lacey Peterson.
I'm Tim Helton. I'm a retired sergeant in the Modesto Police Department and worked for the department during the Lacey Peterson search. The initial call was that she had been out walking her dog in East Loma Park and hadn't returned.
All of Lacey Peterson's valuables, her purse, keys, were all left in the house.
Her husband, Scott, told us that she was missing, and he gave us some information that she may have gone walking down to the park. Scott tells the Modesto police that he last saw Lacey around 9:30 that morning when he left their home to go fishing. He believes she was planning to walk their dog, Mackenzie.
The Peterson dog was found wandering with its leash. No one knew if Lacey had taken it out for a walk, and that's how she disappeared.
I'm John Bueller, one of the detectives that worked the Peterson case. East Loma Park was only about a block and a half away from Scott and Lacey's house, so that was naturally one of the first places that we were going to look.
The park was very important. So immediately that became ground zero for the search for Lacey Peterson. My name is Gloria Gomez. I covered the Scott Peterson case.
Volunteers and officers could actually walk the park on foot that entire night looking for Lacey.
While the search is underway, Modesto police asked Scott down to the station to give a detailed picture of Lacey's day.
So today, she told you what she was going to do for the day. Yeah. And what was that? Take the dog for a walk, and then she's going to the store to buy for Christmas morning breakfast. Well, she's going to make gingerbread cookies for tonight.
I can only imagine how Scott was feeling. His wife was carrying his child. Lacey was excited about being a first-time mom, had the baby's name picked out, little Connor, had the nursery ready.
The nightmare continues for friends and family as Christmas morning arrives and Lacey is still missing.
On Christmas Day, we returned to the park to do an expanded search. The park's huge. It actually runs for several miles along the creek bottom. And we didn't want to overlook anything, so it was a very thorough search.
There was empathy for this unborn child. Is she out there? Did she walk the dog and fall? And is she incapacitated? My name is Ted Rollins. I was a reporter for KTVU. I started covering the Peterson case from the moment Lacey was missing. And it was something that people were instantly attracted to. And they wanted to help, especially people in Modesto. They wanted to find Lacey Peterson.
This is Christmas Day, and there was already a volunteer center. This was a situation where she could be in severe danger, so could her unborn child. So there was an urgency to find her.
Modesto, California was a town of a little over 200,000 people in the Central Valley of California. It was a commuter town, a short drive from San Francisco itself.
Lacey and Scott lived in a really nice middle-class neighborhood in Modesto, and they looked like the perfect American couple.
I then went over to the neighbor's house to start my first interview. One of the things that I was looking for was information about Scott and Lacey. What kind of marriage did they have? Did they have financial problems? Were they good neighbors? This is an extremely important time to get all the information possible.
I am Debbie Volsky. My first impression of Lacey was sweet and outgoing, and she's beautiful. She was kind of like a Disney princess.
Everybody that we talked to all painted Scott as the ideal guy. Nobody badmouthed him behind his back. He just seemed like the all-American boy.
I mean, this guy had the looks, had the wealth, had a golfing scholarship. He had the American dream. Everything just seemed perfect.
When we didn't find her in the park and we didn't find any evidence, it was very concerning.
With no leads in sight, on December 26th, Lacey's family makes an emotional public appeal for her safe return.
Whoever has her, please, please, please let her go. Bring her back.
We love her so much.
I want her back. Please, let us have her back.
You see anguish in the face of Sharon Rocha. Where is my daughter? That's when the panic started.
On December 27th, the FBI joins the investigation as they expand the search drastically, desperate to locate the missing pregnant woman.
Search teams on horseback, in helicopters, in boats, and on foot. Given the huge, enormous geographical area that we were concerned with, it was absolutely a needle in a haystack.
They were constantly showing Lacey Peterson's picture, hoping to get tips.
We had a tip line that was exclusively for tips regarding the Lacey Peterson search.
If you have any information, please call the Lacey hotline.
Lacey didn't do anything that we could see that contributed to her disappearance, such as getting liquored up, going to the bars, getting involved in drugs, running with a rough crowd or anything like that. Her car was still there. There was no evidence of forced break-in in the house, no destruction of property indicating that she had a fight in the house with somebody. It was almost like she just vanished. The leading cause of death for pregnant women is homicide, and generally at the hands of the father of the child. So when we have a pregnant lady missing at the tail end of her pregnancy, of course the first thing we're going to look at is her husband.
Me and my crew, we were all camped out at the home of Lacey Peterson to talk to family members, to try to figure out what exactly was going on. And there's other press there, the national media was there, all the locals were there. It became a show.
When we arrived, we gave the viewers what we knew at the time, and that was who she was, her name, where she was last seen.
Multiple networks gather outside the Peterson home, all competing for the attention of family members.
And then we see Scott. This is my first encounter with Scott Peterson. So the first thing I did, I walked right up to him and I said, listen, Scott, I want to know as much as I can about Lacey, your wife. And he looked at me and he started saying, all I want is Lacey to come home. That's all I want. And I go, I understand that. But the only way the public will feel that is if you go on TV and you tell people how much you love her, how much you miss her. And he goes, you know what? I will do that someday. Then after that, he walked away, and that was it. As a reporter, you're always hoping to make a connection. There was no connection. There was like a wall in front of Scott Peterson.
Scott! Hey, why don't you come and talk to us?
He wanted nothing to do with us, especially the camera. In fact, he asked us not to take his picture.
People want to hear from the husband. The problem Scott has is that he wasn't emotive enough. Grew up in a very stoic family. His dad's like that. You don't emote all over the place.
Lacey's husband was avoiding the media. So right away, I had a feeling like, why is he avoiding us? That was my gut telling me something is odd here.
From everything that I saw, he acted the way any normal husband would do. Does this sound like killer? Not to me.
Coming up, a shocking twist that turns the public and Lacey's family against Scott Peterson.
Here we go.
Everyone knew this was going to rattle the entire case.
And later, is it possible that by focusing on Scott Peterson, the police missed key evidence that would come to light years later?
There was critical evidence that was never presented to Scott's jury. Could have led us to the murder.
Scott Peterson had been planning to kill Lacey.
There's no way that Scott Peterson could have killed her because he was gone by this time.
I'm thinking he didn't do it.
Eight-month pregnant Lacey Peterson disappears on Christmas Eve, kicking off an intensive search and media whirlwind.
Lacey's husband, Scott Peterson, was avoiding the media. So right away, I had a feeling like, why is he avoiding us?
After 72 hours, police are no closer to finding the missing woman.
She was a pregnant mother looking forward to giving birth to her child in a relationship with a man that she adored. It was almost like she just vanished.
3 days earlier, on the same day Lacey was reported missing, it appeared police began forming suspicions about Lacey's husband, Scott Peterson.
When the first patrol officers came out to the house to investigate the report of a missing woman, they called back to the Modesto Police Department and said, send a detective. We have a strange feeling about the husband.
A strange feeling? What is that? What is a strange feeling? I mean, it's an emotional gut reaction because it's a feeling. It's not evidence. I'm Ann Bremner. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I covered the Scott Peterson trial for most of the major networks.
There was very limited information that was available to us from the start. But one of the things that we learned from Sharon, Lacey's mother, was that the first thing that Scott did when he called her is he said, Lacey's missing.
He didn't ask, oh, is she there? Did you talk to Lacey? Is she coming over? Did she go over?
He immediately went to the fact that she was missing, even though her purse was there at the house.
He was very cautious. Everything was very methodical.
There's no evidence, and yet they're thinking she's gone, she's kidnapped, she's murdered, and he's the one that did it. He remained the only suspect at that time, from the beginning to the middle to the end of this case.
The lead detective played me a phone message that had been left by Scott when Scott was driving back from the Berkeley Marina.
He said he had gone fishing the day Lacey disappeared.
On Christmas Eve, the day Lacey was reported missing, Scott had called his wife. The call went to voicemail.
Hey, beautiful. I just left a message at home. 2:15. Lynn's birthday. I won't be able to get to Villa Park to get that basket from Papa. I was hoping you would get the message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
Scott leaving this message for Lacey, I guess you could look at it that, oh, this is something that what a great husband would do. But for us, when you take a look at the wording on that call and you compare it with Scott's demeanor, the flowery I love yous and the affection that was present in the wording on that call didn't match up with his lack of panic when we were dealing with him. But not everyone saw Scott Peterson's behavior as unusual.
From everything that I saw, he acted the way any normal husband would do. I'm Richard Cole. I'm a journalist. I covered the Scott and Lacey Peterson case. He had treated his wife like a queen. No one had ever seen them argue. No one had ever seen them fight. He spent the weekend before Lacey disappeared out in their backyard planting flowers for her. She would say, because she was 8 months pregnant, couldn't bend over and do it herself anymore. So Scott's on his hands and knees planting flowers for his wife. Scott got a designer purse for her for Christmas. That was what was under the tree. Is this the present that a husband was about to kill his wife is going to put under the tree?
Along with Scott's allegedly flowery voicemail, police find Scott's lack of emotion rather odd.
When did you realize you were going to go fishing? Oh, that was a morning decision. That was a morning, so play golf, club, or go fishing. It seemed too cold to go play golf at the club, so decided to, plan to leave.
Scott's demeanor just wasn't one of urgency. He was pretty cool, pretty reserved.
The police are keeping copious notes of all his lack of response, his lack of concern, but he was fully cooperative. He went to the police station and answered questions. How much more cooperative can you be?
What concerns me the most is the fact that your dog came home until you shot. What concerns me most is doing anything I can to further progress. I appreciate that.
To rush to judgment. Are we suspecting him based on evidence, or are we suspecting him based on her feelings?
Although the police believe Scott is acting suspiciously, Lacey's family maintains Scott had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance.
Lacey Peterson's family absolutely loved Scott, and they wanted nothing to do with any speculation that he might have something to do with it.
We believe that Scott has nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance. They're a happy couple, and they love each other very much.
He had a reputation of being the person that went the extra mile to help a neighbor. He had no criminal record.
Pretty much everybody that we talked to all painted Scott as the ideal guy. All the right moves, all the right stories. World traveler. Gosh, what's not to like? I liked him.
As more time went by, it got less and less likely that she would be found safe. The candlelight vigil was held at Loma Park. It was heart-wrenching.
This community has wrapped their arms around the Peterson family and have been very moved by Lacey's disappearance.
Scott told police that he had a warehouse and the boat was in the warehouse. But the Roaches didn't know that he had bought a boat. That was news to them. Police went to this warehouse and they went in.
Although Scott had told them about the warehouse from the beginning, in the weeks following Lacey's disappearance, police would search Scott's warehouse multiple times.
There were these cement blocks that were outlined. It's almost like when you're trying to have something dry and it dries, but you still have the ring of cement. There were 4 of those. And they thought, okay, so it's clear that he made anchors, cement anchors. Where are the anchors? They weren't in the warehouse, so where were they? All these things were starting to add up, and it was starting to paint a picture to police. Maybe Scott Peterson had been planning this for a while. This won't make headlines. It'll be a missing woman, and it'll go away, and he'll pretend to be the grieving husband.
But some believe there to be a very innocent explanation for Scott's supposed secrecy regarding the boat.
There was a big deal made about whether Lacey and her in-laws knew about the boat. I mean, do your in-laws know everything that you have or everything that you do? You showed the police the boat right away. There's no evidence that she did or didn't know, but what's the relevance of that?
The whole story about the boat was from the police side that he had secretly bought the boat as part of his plot to kill Lacey. There was no secret boat. It was a surprise for his father-in-law. So he could say on Christmas, guess what? We have a fishing boat.
Police continue to expand the search. increasingly concentrating on the Berkeley Marina, where Scott had told them he was fishing on Christmas Eve. Scott driving from Modesto to the saltwater there in Berkeley at the marina probably would have taken a little over an hour.
Why would you go fishing in the San Francisco Bay on Christmas Eve and leave your wife, who's 8 months pregnant, home alone? That immediately didn't make sense.
It was unusual that someone would fish San Francisco Bay in such a small boat. The bay can become quite rough.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if someone's convinced, that you're guilty, everything that you do makes you look even more suspicious.
There was some criticism that came from a variety of different people that we only focused on Scott from the beginning, but that's simply not true.
One of the detectives told a neighbor of Scott's within 1 hour of when police were called out that they knew what had happened to Lacey Peterson. It was very clear to the neighbor that he was saying that Scott did. Classic tunnel vision.
It wasn't just a couple of us working on this case. We had a whole team of detectives and officers that were looking at all sorts of other things that were going on. We were checking sex registrants that were living in the area, anybody that had a history of crimes and violence that was paroled out of state prison. These were all happening simultaneously when we were looking at Scott.
There were a lot of very good witnesses who saw Lacey Peterson walking Mackenzie. The police interviewed all these people, and they just dismissed it out of hand. They said they were all wrong.
The police zeroed in on Scott Peterson within hours. He was always their only suspect, truly.
On January 24th, 2003, 1 month after Lacey's disappearance, the Modesto Police Department alerts the media that it will hold a press conference. This will prove to be one of the most shocking twists in the entire case.
Modesto police said at 7 o'clock they were having a press conference. We're like, okay, this is good. They don't hold press conferences unless there's something big. So we're like, they found her. There's a huge tip. Maybe they have a suspect. Maybe they're going to announce Scott's the suspect. We're in the Modesto Police Department's main headquarters. It is packed. We're shoulder to shoulder, reporter to reporter, waiting to hear what Modesto Police have to say. Everyone knew this was going to rattle the entire case. Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Finally, they come out. I had never expected this in a million years. But a petite blonde comes out with all the lead detectives in the case.
Miss Amber Fry will make a brief statement.
Who's Amber Fry?
1 month after the disappearance of Lacey Peterson, Modesto police call a press conference to announce a stunning development in the case.
Miss Amber Fry will make a brief statement.
A petite blonde comes out, and she's shaking, and she looks up, and then she told her story.
I met Scott Peterson November 20th, 2002. Scott told me he was not married. We did have a romantic relationship.
This girl is announcing to the world she was having an affair with Scott Peterson. We're taking this live. This is like breaking news.
I am very sorry for Lacey's family.
That was shocking to us.
Amber Fry took this story and made it absolutely explode.
Secret that has torn two families apart. Scott's affair with Amber Fry. The Fresno woman said Scott tricked her into believing he was single.
When she came on scene, we thought it was a big story beforehand. It went absolutely crazy. People couldn't get enough of it.
Hi, I'm Amber Fry. I didn't ask for this to happen. You know, I was a young single mother, thought I met a great guy, and was excited. I first met him in November. We hit it off really well, and he was funny and charming and good looking. I asked if he had any children, and he said no, and he told me he had lost his wife.
Amber didn't pay much attention to television, so she really didn't know any of the media hoopla that was going around with the missing case involving Lacey.
My daughter, was very young and kept me busy, so the TV just wasn't on. So I never came across it or heard anything. We were dating, and little things were starting to not feel right, like something was up. Like him talking to me when there's water running, like he's in the shower or bathroom of some sort, which just kind of was a little red flaggish. Like, why are you always talking to me with water running? I went to a friend to ask if he could look him up and see if he found anything, whether he was possibly married or still married or just whatever he could find.
So a friend of hers told her that the guy that she'd been seeing, Scott Peterson, could possibly be the husband of a missing girl from Modesto. And that's when she called our tip line. Although the public became aware of her in January 2003, Amber Fry had actually called the Modesto police tip line almost a month earlier. 1 week after Lacey had gone missing, Amber gets a hold of one of my partners. And then she said that she understood that our agency was investigating a guy named Scott Peterson. And she was wondering, Amber, if this was the same guy that she was dating. And I'm sitting across from the lead detective with one desk between us. And so I can see his expression. And I know that something big is up.
The detectives asked if we could meet. And I said, yes. I was on pins and needles, feeling scared. Scott told me he's in Europe. He's, away on a trip. I just learned that he has a missing wife and he's not, in fact, in Europe. He's actually in Modesto.
She wanted to cooperate. She wanted the truth. And she actually showed us that Scott wasn't this perfect guy that everybody had been painting for all this time.
I don't know how long. I sat there and cried. I was in shock. Couldn't tell you how much time passed. At that point, they had asked if I would be willing to record our conversations. And I said yes.
We stopped at Radio Shack to pick up a recording device to attach to Amber's cell phone. And in the midst of putting all this stuff together, Amber gets a call from Scott.
Amber.
Yes. I was fumbly. I was shaking. I was just so nervous. There was just so much to remember because my truth was he was in Europe.
And she was perhaps one of the greatest little actresses I've ever seen in my life. She was able to engage in a conversation with him like we weren't even on the planet.
I always call you, I tell you you're special. And I need a better, bigger word than special. Like the princess horns or something.
Alright, we have to get there, okay?
That's good.
It was challenging because I would get off the phone with him and then just think, and then I immediately call John and say, oh my gosh, this is what he's telling me.
Over a period of weeks, before we finally had her cease the phone contact, Amber recorded over 29 hours of phone conversation with Scott. Before introducing Amber to the world at the press conference, the Modesto police had arranged a meeting with Scott's supporters, Lacey's family, to deliver the shocking news.
And they brought with them a photograph of Scott and Amber together. And when they showed that photograph to Lacey's mom, she looked at it and turned to them and said, why did he have to kill her? And at that moment, Lacey's family absolutely turned on Scott Peterson.
It pretty much unraveled after that. The moment Amber Fry came out, immediately, Lacey Peterson's family had their own press conference.
Our one and only focus is to find Lacey and bring her home to us. I love my daughter so much. I miss her every minute of every day.
Sharon Rocha got right up there and said, we no longer support Scott Peterson. We want him to tell us what happened to Lacey.
We were shocked to find out that he'd been having an affair, and we felt that if he had not been truthful about that possibly there's other things he needs to talk to us about.
There was anger, there was frustration, there was betrayal, everything you could think of that family was feeling at that moment, and we were all airing it live. Now we had a huge story. Huge.
They were convinced that Scott was responsible for Lacey's death. They shut down their volunteer center. They stopped doing searches.
He was having an affair. He didn't want to be public. His wife was missing, but it doesn't make him a killer.
Did you murder your wife?
I get word that Scott's getting ready to talk to the media. He realized that he had to come forward and talk to the media and explain what was going on because of the cloud of suspicion that has been circling him since this all began. I really felt like he was thinking, hey, I am charming. I can talk my way out of anything. And I'll get the public back on my side. And I thought, I have to get this interview. I have to.
I was calling him every day, multiple times a day, asking for an interview. And he always said, oh, yeah, I'll talk to you at some point, but just not today.
I get a call and I see my phone says Scott Peterson on it. So I pick it up. I said, hey, Scott. I said, hey, Gloria, I want to give you a little interview. And I said, great. And I cannot even tell you how excited I was.
Gloria Gomez was one of only 4 journalists Scott selected for interviews. So was Ted Rowlands.
I was happy and relieved, to be honest, that he allowed me to do one of the interviews.
Peterson wanted to do the interview at his house, which I thought, this is cool. I get to go inside the house.
He was in total control of the interview. He restricted to one camera, and he made us take, which was very strange.
I'm like, okay, I've never done an interview with no shoes on, but okay. My photographer knew, like, time was of the essence. So he's moving quick. He's setting up his gear. You're just glancing around, looking around, and then it's going through your mind. It's like, was she killed here? The kitchen area, there was like a chalkboard where they wrote messages back and forth, or maybe notes of maybe groceries or whatever. But on the chalkboard was Merry Christmas. And I thought, wow, I wonder if Lacey wrote that. And I wonder if that's like her last message.
A month after Lacey's disappearance, and just a few days after Amber Fry has come forward, Scott Peterson gives 4 highly coveted television interviews. Is he doing it to save face or to keep the search for Lacey alive?
This is the time to really kind of catch him off guard. I knew that sitting down with him, making him answer questions, was going to be the key to solving this case. There are a lot of suspicions out there. And you had a girlfriend.
Right.
Your response to me is that you had no comment either way.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you just come clean then?
I'm glad you asked the question. It simply, wasn't appropriate to comment on it. It's just not important to comment about that. I'm glad that Amber came forward. Let me turn that off.
Yeah, what is that?
That's my phone, unfortunately.
Okay.
Then I'll answer that question again.
Okay. The phone rings during our interview, which I thought was interesting because it's been over a month, your wife's been missing. Any phone call could be the phone call to say, we found Lacey. She's safe.
Yeah, it's kind of going crazy, isn't it? Okay.
And I thought, wow, if your wife is missing, you think you'd want to take every phone call. What does he do? He turns off the ringer and keeps interviewing. How do you feel, though, that, the Rocha family says they can't trust you?
They're wonderful people, Rocha family, okay. Question my morals and my poor decision making. That's fine. But don't stop looking for Lacey. She's out there somewhere.
It was really a no-win situation for him because no matter what he said or how he said it, people were going to dissect it and say, oh, obviously he's guilty. Look at the way he says that.
And you can be the key to finding it and putting out that mix.
You're looking at the camera.
Well, it's a plea to the audience.
Go ahead.
That's why we're doing this. That's really all I'm trying to say.
The more he did it, the more people picked away at it.
Obviously, the relationship had been was inappropriate. I told Lacey about it in December. It could have been not just married. Obviously not a positive thing.
While Peterson may have tried to control the interviews themselves, he could not control the media coverage on them afterwards.
To suggest to ordinary people like myself that his wife was, and I'm quoting, okay with it, that he was having an affair. And I think that's a glaring lie.
The problem Scott has is that he wasn't emotive enough. Doesn't work real well on television.
I saw what everybody else saw in that interview.
After you told Lacey, you continued to see Amber. Was that also the right thing to do?
No.
And then, even after Lacey went missing, you continued to romance this girl?
No.
After he did the interview, he immediately called me and was like, I didn't say that. I'm sure you watched it, but they cut me off. I didn't say that. So, I mean, he was dishonest about that too.
But not everyone in the media is so quick to write off Scott Peterson.
As soon as Amber Fry stepped onto the scene, it explained everything to me. Why Scott Peterson was acting the way he was. Why didn't he want his image on television? Well, because he had a girlfriend.
If I were in the same position and I had a mistress, I would certainly be tempted not to tell the police and have it all come out, and then your wife comes in. And you say, oh, I've just destroyed my family.
Amber Fry was the explanation for all of this. And for me, unlike everybody else, I'm thinking he didn't do it.
Two months after Scott's interviews, and well past his wife's due date, Lacey and Connor's fate remains a mystery. Hope for their discovery is dim.
The case basically slowed down because the search for Lacey was turning up nothing. There was nothing that tied Lacey's disappearance to Scott. They had no physical evidence. They couldn't arrest him, so this case really wasn't going anywhere until what happened next, and that changed everything. The night of April 12th, there was a very intense storm in the San Francisco Bay Area. The next morning, April 13th, a couple was walking their dog, and they saw something strange along the shoreline, something along the rocks. They called police.
4 months into the investigation, body of a child, almost full term, is discovered on the shore outside the area where Scott had been fishing.
There's a huge tip. Me and my crew head out there, and sure enough, they're confirming it's the body of a fetus, a baby. And so, as I'm getting ready to go live, I am literally on the phone with sources, getting as much information as I can about this.
The next day, April 14th, the body of a adult female was discovered in the same general area.
No head, no arms, no legs, just a female torso.
Intense interest just ignited again, and people believed that this was likely Lacey and this unborn child, which they'd named Connor.
Investigators are trying to determine if the bodies found in the San Francisco Bay belong to missing Modesto woman Lacey Peterson and the baby she was pregnant with when she disappeared.
This case was now back on the front pages.
You had that sick feeling in your stomach that this was going to be Lacey and Connor. And here we have the bodies recovered near the Berkeley Marina in the area where Scott had been. It was pretty evident at that point that, at least to me, that he was probably going to be responsible for their murder.
No word yet on whether the two bodies found in the bay are those of Lacey Peterson and her baby. The lab results could come any time now. The big question now is, where is Scott Peterson?
Constant surveillance on Scott was being done at that time. Scott's hovering around San Diego. There always was the concern that Scott would try to take off, possibly across the border into Mexico, and then it was going to be a whole new set of problems to bring him back. So as they're processing the DNA evidence to try and link these two bodies together and to Scott, we're preparing our arrest warrant.
An arrest was coming, and was coming soon.
On the 18th of April, 2003, we finally received verification that the DNA on the two bodies that were found confirmed it was Lacey Peterson and her unborn son, Connor, and that's when we arrested Scott. And that's when we discovered all the things that he had in that car.
When Scott was arrested, he had nearly $15,000 in cash with him. He had a backpack with knives and water purifier. He had an axe, dyed his hair kind of orange-ish blonde, and he had a goatee. He looked a lot different.
Every place he went, people said, "Oh, it's Scott Peterson." So he was hoping to disguise himself. He's trying to get away from the media. He was being followed by private detectives.
He had snorkeling equipment. He had backpacking equipment. He had neckties, dress shoes. He had dress shirts. He had shorts, all packed into that car, which suggested to me that he was planning on leaving, and he could have certainly gone across the border. Was Scott planning to escape across the border? Or was there a more innocent explanation as to why he was headed south?
There was never any indication he was going to Mexico. His life in Modesto had been destroyed. And so he went down, spent time with his parents in San Diego.
His family had an explanation for everything that Scott was found with. But in totality, he's in San Diego near the Mexican border, and he has all of this with him. It sure did make it look like he was ready to run.
I had sources with the Modesto Police Department. I got word he was going to be arrested. We had graphics with Scott's picture, boom, with the word arrest on it. That's how prepared we were.
The Modesto police whipped up a media frenzy through lies and leaks, and it kept the reporters on their side. They created this atmosphere of hatred focused on Scott Peterson.
Finally, that phone call comes. So I go on the air and I break the news. Scott Peterson's been arrested. This is just the beginning. We haven't even got to the trial yet.
Scott Peterson is charged with the murder of his wife and unborn son.
I'm convinced that he's innocent.
But will he get a fair trial?
There was more media at this case than there was at O.J. Simpson.
There was a mob. There was a lynching.
Amber Fry knows she's a reluctant celebrity.
That jury hated him.
Scott was going down.
What started with a report of a missing pregnant woman is now a notorious double murder case in Modesto, California.
When 8-month pregnant Lacey Peterson went missing on Christmas Eve, the community searched furiously, hoping for her safe return.
The reward for information leading to Lacey's whereabouts stands at $500,000.
Police appeared to immediately focus their attention on Lacey's husband, Scott, possibly ignoring other potential suspects. Shocking revelations about Scott's personal life turned the media and the public against him.
Scott told me he was not married.
A week after 2 bodies washed ashore, police arrested Scott Peterson, although there was no forensic evidence connecting him to the crime.
DNA analysis completed yesterday established the identities as Lacey Peterson and their baby.
Once the bodies were found, I had called some of the family. I know I called Brad, Lacey's brother. It was hard because these are people. They're not just the subjects of their story, they're people.
such a good guy. Said he did this to her. And he did this to her. At that point, you're not really a reporter. You're just a human being relating to another human being in complete anguish.
Returning from San Diego with Scott Peterson in custody, the Modesto police must notify Scott about his wife and child.
We told him that the DNA results had identified Lacey and Connor. There might have been a little sniffle. I couldn't tell really if he was tearing up too much. But of course, I'm driving, so I can't study him too much except through the rearview mirror. We continued to drive until they said, hey, we're going to get something to eat. If you'd like, we'll get you something to eat. And that was when he said, well, John, where are you thinking of stopping? And I told him, I said, well, there's an In-N-Out burger up the road. And he looked at me and he just said, In-N-Out. I'll have a double with cheese, a small fry, and a vanilla shake. Maybe 10, 20 minutes earlier, we told him that his wife and his child were dead. And he's ordering a cheeseburger like it's no big deal, like you're coming back from fishing. Now, to me, that kind of summed it up. And if I had any doubts about his involvement in her murder, they were pretty much erased with his order of that cheeseburger. We had heard that he was taken into custody around noon down in San Diego and that they were on their way back. Over the next few hours, this huge crowd assembled outside the jail. And when they pulled in, it was an incredible scene. People were yelling murderer, and it was something that I'd never seen before or since. He was in the back seat of a sedan, and they brought him in. It was just a wild scene. I'll never forget it.
Under tight security, Scott Peterson was walked into a packed Modesto courtroom today, facing 2 counts of murder.
California law allows for a second count of murder for the death of an unborn child.
The prosecution charged him with double murder and immediately said that they were intending to seek the death penalty.
Even though there was no direct evidence in this case, no eyewitnesses, no blood, no fingerprints, no saliva, no anything, no crime scene. The DA announced they'd be seeking the death penalty for Scott Peterson. A week later, Scott Peterson hires Mark Argos.
Mark Argos, he had already established himself as a high-powered attorney in Los Angeles who had celebrity clients like Winona Ryder, Michael Jackson. He's the big dog.
The story of how he got Mark Argos was very interesting. He appeared, I believe, on Larry King. Argos said, well, of course he's guilty.
They seem to be fairly confident that they have something, and they clearly are focused on him.
Jackie, his mom, got hold of Garagos and told him the story. And Garagos said, okay, maybe I'll check this out.
In 3 months, Garagos goes from skeptic to convert.
He became convinced that he's innocent.
When was that?
After talking with the parents and reviewing the discovery.
Choosing a lawyer is difficult in any case, but when you get to a level of this type of media coverage, you need a lawyer that can handle the spotlight. For someone like Mark Argos to step into this case is basically a light at the end of the tunnel for someone like Scott Peterson.
Mark Argos suggested Detective Phil Owens did not follow up on critical leads.
Garagos immediately gets to work investigating suspects the police did not pursue.
Mark Argos said that there was this subculture in Modesto of real dark, demented people that were going around kidnapping pregnant women. And one of them happened to be Lacey Peterson. They were driving up, saw Lacey, kidnapped her, threw her in the van.
Before Lacey had disappeared, the Children of Satan cult had been prosecuted by the Modesto DA on multiple murder counts. My name is Matt Dalton. I am a criminal defense lawyer, worked on the Scott Peterson case.
7 pregnant women disappeared in that area between 1999 and 2002.
The Modesto VA's office had a cult unit which specialized in the prosecution of cult members. It's not a coincidence that 7 pregnant women disappeared from that area. I'm telling you, on Lacey Peterson, there's satanic cult influence here. She was targeted because she was pregnant. It appears police chose not to investigate this theory.
You can't just look at one person, no matter how smart you think you are as an investigator, that you've got the right guy, and ignore all other leads. Scott Peterson was always their only suspect, truly, in the matter.
A survey conducted by a local TV station finds that 83% of Bay Area residents think Scott Peterson is guilty or probably guilty. To counteract this, defense attorney Mark Garagos uses a pretrial motion to push for a change of venue.
The judge ruled that there needed to be a change of venue. There was no way they could hold this trial in Stanislaus County because Scott was enemy number 1 there.
The judge agrees to move the trial from Modesto to Redwood City.
Redwood City and Modesto are basically the same communities. 80 miles away, if they have the same basic news coverage. Well, Michael Cardoza, I was part of the Scott Peterson criminal defense team. You want to move this case and give this to a fair guy, you move it to LA or San Diego, where people don't pay a lot of attention to it. That is the biggest mistake in this trial.
Wall-to-wall media coverage of the case makes it incredibly difficult to find impartial jurors.
You couldn't go anywhere where people didn't know about the Scott Peterson case. It took months and months and months to pick a jury. Most of them said, no, I think he's guilty.
Attorneys interview over 1,500 potential jurors over a period of 9 weeks before agreeing upon a jury.
My name is Mike Belmessieri. I was juror number 4 in the Scott Lee Peterson murder trial.
I'm Justin Faulkner. I was juror number 5 in the Scott Peterson trial.
When I first received the summons for jury duty, my wife handed it to me. I opened it up and I go, oh, damn, that jury duty. She goes, oh, it's probably for the Peterson trial. I said, no way.
I didn't follow anything about Scott Peterson or Lacey Peterson, but when I got the jury notice, I just thought it was for a random jury trial, so automatically it was, how do I get out of this?
With the change of venue, a new judge is assigned to the trial. On his first day, Judge DeLucchi bans cameras from the courtroom to reduce media influence on the jury.
Judge DeLucchi did not want the jurors swayed by seeing the media cameras in his courtroom. I'm Peter Chaplin. I was the media coordinator for the Scott Peterson double murder trial.
The trial of Scott Lee Peterson begins on June 1st, 2004, 17 months after Lacey Peterson was reported missing. With Scott Peterson's life on the line, lead prosecutor Rick DiStasso faces off against defense attorney Mark Garagos. DiStasso has prosecuted several death penalty cases. This is Garagos' first.
When I walked into that courtroom, when I finally saw Scott Peterson, I saw a young man who was about the same age as my oldest son.
And you walk in the room and the place was packed. And it was like, wow. I mean, wow.
The interest in the trial was off the charts. There were people from literally around the world covering this trial.
I had a friend that was in Iraq and saw my face on the TVs playing in the background.
You know, OJ tried to watch on TV. That was easy. This was a little different. Cameras were not allowed, yet information was disseminating out of that courtroom.
Reporters inside the courtroom managed to work around Judge DeLucchi's restrictions.
You could either text or email from inside the courtroom, and that was the way you could alert your producers around the country on what was going on minute to minute. So while there were no cameras allowed during the trial, there was plenty of information.
There was more media at this case than there was at O.J. Simpson. The media demonized him, saying he was one murderer, Scott Peterson.
After almost a year of preliminary hearings, jury selection, a change of venue, and an increasing public appetite for all things Scott Peterson, the trial for the murder of Lacey and Connor Peterson is underway.
I think Scott Peterson was a cold, calculating person. I think he intended to kill Lacey.
The prosecutors presented to the jury a very strong circumstantial evidence case. And they did it methodically, and they did it in a way that was very compelling to this jury.
The prosecution's case was Scott killed Lacey in the home. He then transported her body in the back of his truck to the warehouse where he kept his boat. He then transferred her body into the boat and then took the boat out to the bay. He left her body there, anchored down by these little 8-pound anchors that he supposedly created in the warehouse. That was what they wanted us to believe.
But not everyone believes this version of events. He's not a guy that would kill a woman.
The police, early on in the case, had leaked false stories about Scott making anchors. The lead detective says that he sees an outline of 5 circular marks on Scott's flatbed trailer. Show us what you were looking at. We see the picture, but there aren't 5 circular marks on that flatbed trailer. He made it up. 0 evidence of anchors being made.
The prosecution was unable to create any momentum at all because there was no real physical evidence against Scott Peterson. There was no murder weapon, there was no blood, no DNA.
I remember during the trial, I railed against the prosecutors, saying they weren't prepared. Right from the get-go, I could tell they're not going to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt.
With no forensic evidence, it appeared to some that prosecutor Rick DiStasso was presenting a lackluster case.
Garagos was doing a very good job. I actually wondered to myself if DiStasso actually believed what he was putting forth, because it just didn't seem like he did. The prosecution did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he killed her.
The feeling was, for the first few months of this trial, was that Scott Peterson was going to be found not guilty.
The public need for any stories related to the case continues to drive the media frenzy.
The insatiable appetite for this story was like nothing that I'd ever seen before. This was covered on an hourly basis, not just a wrap-up of what happened in court today. It was what happened 10 minutes ago, and people were glued to every part of this case.
They all wanted to be part of the big show because it became a show. It became a spectacle, really.
It was big business for the networks. What was happening was riveting, even if you couldn't see it. That drama helped networks sell a lot of commercial time because the audience was eating it up.
They had set up tents, and all of these legal analysts came out of nowhere. They came out of the woodwork, and they would all break apart every witness. Were they credible? Were they not credible? So we were getting analysis in a split second. The moment they were off the stand, it was insane.
With every network delivering its own spin on the case, even the people deciding Scott's fate can't escape the media.
That jury should have been taken away and sequestered, taken out back doors, not let anywhere near the public, not be allowed to go home during that whole trial.
You know, you're walking past these media tents, and they're in there, you know, talking about Scott Peterson this, Scott Peterson that, and it's the next tent, and it's the next tent. I hear it, what they're saying, you know, I mean, and it's not like I had a choice. There was no going around it. The media was always filming inside the lobby of the courthouse. And I was coming to the courthouse one morning. Brett Rocha happened to be standing next to me that day. And there was a cameraman right behind us. I said, trying to avoid the news today? And he said, yeah, wait till they're calling for your garbage. That was all we said. And the media was all over me. What'd you say to Brent? Man, the bailiff said, Justin, will he talk to you in the judge's chamber? I said, okay. And I walked in there. Judge Lupi said, we're going to go ahead and let you go.
Justin Falconer is dismissed for having contact with the victim's brother, Brent Rocha, despite the fact that their exchange had nothing to do with the case.
I kind of was surprised by it. Garagos was furious. I remembered Mark Garagos saying, are we letting the media pick our juries now?
Garagos demanded a mistrial, but was refused. Justin Falconer, dismissed and now free to talk to the press, gave both the prosecution and the defense their first real insight as to what the jury might be thinking.
An excused juror told reporters he thinks Scott Peterson is not guilty.
I haven't seen anything that, would make me believe that, he committed this crime.
Justin Falconer was very clear about that. Scott Peterson was innocent, and it was a real wake-up call for both sides.
Amber Fry knows she's a reluctant celebrity in an intensely publicized murder trial.
When Amber Fry walked into that courtroom, everything changed.
It was packed, and it was completely silent. You could hear people's bodies shift to see me walk in. After they swear you in, I was to point out Scott Peterson. That was the only time that I had to look at him. Only thing I had to do was give truthful testimony.
What she was able to do on that stand turned every member of that jury against Scott Peterson. Not only by her testimony, but more importantly, by those tapes.
Cooperating with the police, Amber Fry had started taping her conversations with Scott just 6 days after Lacey went missing. These tapes became the prosecution's most damning evidence.
One of the most poignant phone calls between Amber Fry and Scott Peterson was a call made on New Year's Eve. And during that time, there's a vigil going on for Lacey.
Hello?
Baby,
Yes.
Amber,
How was your New Year's?
it's good. I mean, it's pretty awesome. Fireworks and everything for the Eiffel Tower.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you guys decided to go out.
Oh, definitely.
Scott told me he's in Europe and he was walking on cobblestones and there was all kinds of festivities going on.
You never remember your friend's name.
That's all. That's all, yeah.
Good.
Alright, okay.
Resolution?
What should my New Year's resolution be?
Oh, I don't know. That was my question.
What he did, talking on the phone to his mistress, lying about being in Paris, while he's at a vigil for his missing wife, is something that you cannot relate to as a human being.
Miss you, and I'll try to call you back. It'll be 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to call you back to your New Year's. To your New Year's. I just think that
Typically, as a juror, you envision yourself as the defendant. This was a scenario where, as a juror, you look at him, you listen to those tapes, and you cannot envision yourself in his seat.
I'm going to miss you, baby.
Yeah.
It should be a very special tomorrow.
I get reminded every so often.
Our relationship, it will grow. Of course, it's better.
So, you know, everything in its time.
You know how beautiful you are. Good.
Good night.
The jury is now seeing two faces of Scott Peterson. One where he's the grieving husband that he plays for the cameras. On the other end, a narcissist psychopath who's on the phone with the woman he's romancing while his wife is still missing and he's portraying himself as the grieving husband. And the jury is not liking Scott Peterson. That jury hated him.
Amber Fry's conversation with Scott They did tend to make you wonder about the credibility of the individual sitting in the defense table.
What the prosecution was doing was putting up a picture of Lacey Peterson all alone at a Christmas party, pregnant. This is what Lacey was doing while he's cheating with Amber Fry. Is that any evidence of anything? No. Is that a rational argument? No. Was it a persuasive argument? Hell yes.
Amber Fry, they went after her pretty hard. Mark Garagos wanted to ruin her reputation. He said, you know what? She's some floofy, just some loose tramp that, slept with Scott on the first night. But I think she came off very sympathetic. Like, really another victim of Scott.
The prosecution was struggling, but after Amber took the stand and the tapes were played, it was over. Scott was going down.
The prosecution presents some of its most persuasive evidence near the end of their case. Horrific autopsy photos of Connor and Lacey Peterson.
Little Con, he was almost fully developed. You could see his face, and all you had is the torso of Lacey. That's all you had.
Oh, God, they were terrible. When I saw that, after having seen the beautiful young woman who was that before, it hit me.
Lacey's mom and stepdad, you could see the wear and tear on their faces, the emotions.
It's been nearly 2 years since Lacey Peterson was reported missing. For over 4 months, the prosecution has presented a circumstantial case against Scott Peterson. Most compelling are the audio recordings of Peterson and Amber Fry and the gruesome autopsy photos.
On October 5th, the prosecution rested. They proved that Scott Peterson had done exactly what he said he did that morning. He went fishing. But they presented a scenario where somehow Scott Peterson killed Lacey. They have no forensic evidence. Drags her out, puts her body in the back of his pickup truck. They examined that truck over. There was no forensic evidence in the truck, and it had not been cleaned. Drives her to his office to pick up the boat. Transfers her body in an open parking lot into the boat. He says to himself, oh, wait, I have some email I need to check. This is what the evidence at the trial showed.
I don't know anybody who would have the nerve, if you will, to sit inside of an office and send off Christmas emails while the body of my dead wife is sitting in the back of my truck.
And he goes, and he drives 90 miles to the Berkeley Marina.
It was a marina full of thousands of houseboats. There were people there that watched him try to back the boat up into the water. He hit a pole. They saw this. This boat was tiny. They can see inside the boat.
Goes out and dumps that body in the shallowest part of San Francisco Bay. The whole story just didn't make any sense to me.
Starting October 18, 2004, more than 4.5 months into the trial, with the possibility of the death penalty on the table, Mark Garagos presents Scott's defense.
What I expected from the defense was for them to tell me why Scott was innocent, or to give me some evidence that would suggest that he wasn't guilty.
Eager to create reasonable doubt, the defense presents a different scenario for what might have happened to Lacey Peterson.
Lacey was kidnapped by homeless people. They took her, and then they killed her, and they drove her over the San Francisco Bridge and threw her in the bay. You have a homeless person kidnapping this woman. They have to have a vehicle that they can afford to drive to San Francisco Bay. And then I guess they had to have a boat, took her out there and dumped her in the bay. That's basically the summarization of the defense's case. There was nothing to indicate or that would support that claim.
A jury trial, especially a murder trial, in a special circumstance case, in other words, a death penalty case, is based a whole lot on emotion and a whole lot on whether the jury likes the defendant or not. We know in this case Scott was not well liked. In my mind, I thought, you got to put Scott on. We got to have him explain this. I did cross-examine him in a mock cross-examination. There was not enough time to prepare him to properly testify in front of that jury. Too little, too late.
Scott never testified, so you had to draw conclusions based on things other than his testimony.
Garagos' decision to keep Scott Peterson off the stand may have been the safe choice.
Why take a chance to put a witness on the stand who might screw you up? Certainly that's why you don't put Scott Peterson on the stand.
I believe Mark felt he was so far ahead, and the case against Scott was so weak that he was able to rest without presenting critical information.
The defense never presented any evidence nor testimony that would lead anybody to believe within reason that Scott Peterson was not guilty of murder.
The defense was working on the assumption that they were working an old-fashioned trial where you present the facts, if there's reasonable doubt, you get acquitted. What the defense didn't know is the jurors didn't want to hear the facts.
After nearly 5 months of grueling testimony, the case goes to the jury.
By the end of the trial, I didn't like Scott Peterson, and others didn't like him either. But it had no bearing on our decision of guilt or innocence.
I can tell you straight up, this jury, they didn't base it on the facts of the case because they had no facts. They did it on pure emotion.
When the deliberations first started, we brought in the whiteboard. We had papers hanging all over. We had flip charts. And, it was okay. Let's begin to dissect the case.
The jurors deliberated for 6 days, and we heard nothing. As every day passed, the intensity just ratcheted up, the pressure. People were coming to the courthouse. Even though court wasn't in session, they were just standing around waiting for word that the jury had come to a verdict.
There was a mob outside that courtroom. I'm telling you, it was a hanging mob.
The case was saturated with media, and so the jurors really had no choice but to comply with kind of a mob mentality that was arguably created by the media.
Is it possible the jury is feeling the intense pressure from the public gathered outside?
Those jurors think, oh my God, if I vote not guilty in this, what's going to happen to me? Will they come to my house? Will my life be threatened?
1 week into the deliberations, jury foreman Gregory Jackson asks Judge DeLucchi to remove him from the case.
He went to the judge and said that they're not in there deliberating a guilt or innocence. They're deliberating the best book view. I want to be off this jury. And inexplicably, he was dismissed.
Removing a juror in the middle of deliberations is unusual and extreme. Gregory Jackson is the second juror replaced during deliberations. Pundits and public alike are shocked by Judge DeLucchi's action.
I've heard people say that our jury foreman wanted off because he felt threatened by other jurors. And I don't know how he would have felt that way.
Somehow those 11 people intimidated the Holy Jesus out of him to the point where he went to the judge and said, I really feel threatened. They got to get me out of here. That shocked him today.
The verdict happened on November 12th. By the time the verdict was going to be announced at 1:30, the plaza was filled, and these people were emotionally charged. They wanted justice. They wanted justice as they saw it.
The day of the verdict, Jackie Peterson was Scott's mom. She walked in, she had the oxygen with the tank, looking frail, and Sharon Rocha, Lacey's mother, along with Brent, Lacey's brother.
The courtroom was packed and dead silent.
I remember the jurors filing in. My heart was like,
all eyes are on the poor person, trying to read the jury. Was there any kind of signal at all that we could discern? And there wasn't.
A verdict is reached. But is it based on evidence or emotion?
The jury system didn't work.
And will Scott Peterson have grounds to make a successful appeal?
There was critical evidence that was never presented to Scott's jury.
A juror lied during jury selection.
That's a pretty big red flag to me.
After an exhausting and emotional double murder trial that dominated national news for 5 months, Scott Peterson returns to the courtroom to receive his verdict.
The people of the state of California versus Scott Lee Peterson, we the jury.
Find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of...
And the crowd absolutely went crazy. You could even hear it on the second floor in the courtroom.
Cheers. Congratulating is like your team just won the Super Bowl.
it was a circus. People were excited and like giving each other high fives. It was disturbing. All of these lives have been destroyed. There's nothing to be celebrated.
The jury reached its verdict after just 7 days of deliberations.
When we rendered our verdict, what I saw, what my 11 other fellow jurors saw, was very clear. Scott kills Lacey. Scott dumps Lacey in the bay. Scott's behavior is not indicative of what one would expect of a grieving husband. If the body had turned up at Sassoon Bay, Richardson Bay, down in Milpitas, 100-something miles out of where he says he was, Scott would be walking free today. That's not where it turned up. She was found near the Berkeley Marina, exactly where Scott had been fishing. That was really the ultimate factor that supported our decision.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Peterson is guilty because he went fishing at the same place the body was found, and he didn't act as a normal husband would act in this particular case. To me, that's shocking.
Detective Roccini has a press conference in December of 2002. They announced that Scott Peterson was fishing in the San Francisco Bay. That information was leaked early in the case. It has no value. The fact that he was there on the 24th doesn't prove anything.
Certainly raised the possibility that somebody else could have dumped her body there after Scott became the center of attention.
On October 30th, 2004, the trial penalty phase begins. This time, jurors will also hear impact statements from family members before deciding whether or not Scott Peterson should be put to death.
I think the moment everybody remembers was when Sharon Rocha took the stand.
Oh my God. Sharon Rocha's impact statement was riveting. She spoke for Lacey and Connor.
She goes, "You left her with no arms to clutch her child to protect Connor." I mean, she was looking right at him as she was testifying to this. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. That's how quiet the courtroom was.
Even for a tough old sport like me, it hits you. But how could it not?
The jurors were crying.
It didn't hit Scott. It didn't hit him. What the hell is wrong with you, fool?
When the jury came back, none of them looked at Scott.
The jurors returned once again to deliver a verdict, but this time they will choose life or death for Scott Peterson.
We, the jury, above and below cause, fix the penalty at death.
Sharon, she hunched over like this. There was a collective exhale in the room. Like, it was over.
All the jury was given in the penalty phase was evidence based on emotion. So how can you expect the jury to make a decision based on anything other than emotion?
Guess what, Scotty?
San Quentin's your new home.
And it's illegal to kill your wife and child in California.
The jury got so emotionally entangled with this and had such hate and dislike for Scott and walked that death penalty verdict right in.
Scott Peterson was judged, not on the basis of evidence that came into trial. He was judged with a scarlet A across his chest for adultery.
Did people come across like they didn't like him? Of course, because they didn't. And who would? It was a witch hunt. It was a mob. It was a lynching. In this instance, the jury system didn't work.
I do not believe Scott Peterson should be on death row. I think this was a bizarre combination of media insanity and police duplicity. And what the prosecution did par excellence is make people angry at Scott Peterson. It fed into a narrative that people wanted. Media fed on it. The police used it, and he became the devil to many people.
In 2015, Scott Peterson submitted a habeas petition to the California Supreme Court looking to overturn his conviction due to evidence that has come to light. Peterson's sister, Janie Peterson, summarized the new information in a statement. There was critical evidence that was never presented to Scott's jury. Several witnesses have come forward who saw Lacey Peterson after Scott Peterson had left his home for the day.
6 witnesses reported seeing Lacey Peterson alive walking her dog around the block on the morning of December 24, all documented in the Modesto police reports.
Why weren't those 6 witnesses presented to the jury?
The police interviewed all these people, and they just dismissed it. It was important to the police that nobody had seen Lacey walking that dog, because if they did, then their whole theory falls apart. Then there's no way that Scott Peterson could have killed her, because he was gone by this time.
Also in the petition, evidence that a house near the Petersons was burglarized around the time Lacey went missing.
My theory is that the burglary occurred on the day that Lacey went missing. Lacey went out for the walk that morning, went down to the park. She came back up. She happened to see the Medina residence being burglarized.
She sees the van, maybe she sees people moving stuff into the van, and goes over and says, "Hey, who are you and what are you doing?" Because that's who she was.
They panicked, they snatched her up, and forced her into the van.
One of the guys who was involved in the burglary, a friend of his, was now in prison. The guy's brother was talking to him, and the brother in prison says to him, "What about the Lacey thing?" And the brother outside says, "Don't say anything. This conversation is being recorded." The defense since then has gone back and said, "Well, we want to see the tape." Oops, tape gone. That's a pretty big red flag to me.
And it doesn't stop there. The habeas petition even includes new evidence about a juror who lied to get on the jury.
A juror lied during jury selection on something really important, which was she'd been a victim of a very similar crime. And when she was asked that question, have you been a victim of crime? She said no. That's called a self-juror. If you can't find out if a juror was biased, it impacts your right to a fair and impartial jury under the Sixth Amendment. You didn't get a fair trial. It's clearly not over for Scott Peterson.
He murdered my child. So as far as I'm concerned, he's where he needs to be. No, I don't think the wound ever closes. The word closure means nothing to me. It's just a word. Because Lacey's gone, so that is never going to come to an end and close. And I missed her as much today as I did from the very beginning.
Tune in to Oxygen.com for more.
Emma Smith was a respected member of her community.
She was like the perfect pastor's wife.
And her husband was a popular preacher.
Everybody loved Ernest. Never heard of anybody saying that they disliked him.
Which made the circumstances around his death that much more tragic.
She heard Ernest call and say, "Baby, I've been shot."
The case went cold, lost in a deluge of crime that flooded New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina.
Given what the police department was going through at the time, this goes by the wayside.
But then Emma remarried.
He was a handsome guy, and he was fun.
And less than 6 years later, he was dead.
James Rain had been murdered.
Was it a tragic coincidence?
They have really no suspects.
Or would one family's quest for justice
We let the murderer off the streets.
expose the awful truth about Emma?
That's when the bombshell was dropped on us.
New Orleans, Louisiana, April 12, 2006. It was a steamy spring night in this normally laid-back river city known around the world as the Big Easy.
It's a city that definitely knows how to enjoy itself. We love parades, we love Mardi Gras.
But that April, living in New Orleans was anything but easy. 8 months after Hurricane Katrina, the city still struggled to rebuild after the catastrophe. Its population hovering at around 200,000, barely 50% of what it was before the storm blew through.
I'm not even sure you could say we were recovering at that point.
And that night, the city's population was about to get even smaller.
Sometime before midnight, the call comes into 911.
The caller was 41-year-old Emma Smith.
She stated her husband had just been killed and that she needed the police.
When police arrived minutes later, they were greeted by a gruesome scene. 38-year-old Ernest Smith lay dead just inside the couple's townhouse.
His shirt was saturated with blood. He was shot twice in his chest.
Emma told the police her husband had been out that night with a friend and that she'd been upstairs in bed when the shooting occurred.
She wasn't feeling very well. She had taken a sleeping pill, and then she heard a couple of popping sounds.
She heard the sound outside, and she just thought it was a car that had backfired.
And according to Emma, it was only moments later that she realized what really happened.
Mr. Smith somehow managed to get himself into the house and said, "Baby, I've been shot."
Was Emma's husband simply another casualty of a city in chaos, with local government and law enforcement left so crippled by the storm's damage that it had almost descended into anarchy?
The city was struggling to fight crime in the wake of Hurricane Katrina.
Or would it take years and another murder to reveal the whole story?
It's almost titillating. There's a fascination with, how can somebody do this?
Born in 1964 in the sleepy river town of Vicksburg, Mississippi, Emma started life in modest circumstances, but grew up dreaming of bigger, better things.
She always wanted to be rich. She always wanted to live a lavish lifestyle. She always wanted to drive fancy cars.
And once Emma finished high school, she set out to make those dreams a reality.
During her time in Pittsburgh, she was a tax preparer.
Emma also married and had 2 kids, a son and a daughter. But in 1993, when Emma was 29, disaster struck.
Emma's first husband, he was hit by a car, which left him as a paraplegic.
Emma spent the next year nursing her paralyzed husband, who tragically passed away in 1994.
He ended up choking to death on his feeding tube in bed one night.
A widow and a single mom at the age of 29, Emma decided to put some distance between her 11 and 12-year-old children and the memories of their father's tragic death. Soon after her husband's funeral, she moved the family to New Orleans, where she met a charismatic young minister named Ernest Smith. 4 years younger than Emma, Ernest had a hard childhood growing up in the Big Easy.
His mother and father did die. He was around 10, and he was adopted.
He never talked about his past, never talked about his parents.
But other than a reluctance to talk, his tragic childhood left few emotional scars.
He was always like a little boy, always happy. I've never seen him where he was sad, never had a ugly look or anything on his face. I never seen him sour. I never seen him angry.
After high school, Ernest did a stint in the National Guard, got married, and had a daughter. But when the marriage ended in divorce, Ernest sought solace in religion and found his true calling.
He loved teaching the gospel and he loved preaching the gospel.
He just loved what he did. He was dedicated to the gospel.
He worked Monday through Friday as a truck driver, but shortly before he met Emma, the passionate preacher managed to start his own church. And every Sunday, people flocked to hear him preach.
He was always excited about something. When you first meet him, you fall in love with him.
That was apparently true in Emma's case. Soon after attending a service one Sunday, the single mom and the single pastor were dating.
She was very captivating. We all were.
And in 1995, she and Ernest were married.
She was like the perfect pastor's wife. She was a good host. If you came to her home, you was treated like royalty.
Being a pastor's wife is a very hard job anyway, and she was doing a very good job as far as being first lady.
Although, like Ernest, even the first lady had to work outside the church in order to make ends meet.
She had all these different ideals and jobs that she was doing.
She owned a wig shop. She was into real estate, and she was a tax preparer.
And together, the couple raised Emma's 2 children, who Ernest treated as his own.
He was a real father to them. I know they loved him, and he did everything that a father would do.
He would often throw barbecues, and they had a pool at the house, and everybody would come over and enjoy themselves.
From what I can see from their family relationship, it was pretty good. Everything was just great between them both. To me, it was a perfect, loving family.
But in 2005, Emma's perfect life was once again swept up by tragedy, one that would affect the entire community. At the end of August, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans.
I remember one of the elected officials, as he surveyed sort of the city and looked out over the community, he said, "New Orleans as we know it will never exist again."
The storm forced the evacuation of more than half of the city's residents, including Emma, Ernest, and the kids.
During Katrina, they were displaced, and they went to Arlington, Texas.
In Texas, Ernest got a temporary truck driving job, and Emma's children, both in their early 20s, found work and settled in too. But Emma didn't stay in Houston long. Instead, she returned to New Orleans almost as soon as the floodwaters receded.
She had businesses that she had to get back online.
Ernest, with his congregation scattered by the storm, stayed behind in Texas, hoping to earn enough money to see the couple through the crisis.
So I think he stayed there for the job.
And when Ernest did return to New Orleans, he wasn't planning to be there long, because a new opportunity promised to take the family and Ernest's career to the next level.
He was supposed to be moving to Atlanta to take over a 500-member church.
He was very excited about that new chapter.
in his life. Just excited about becoming pastor there.
So in April of 2006, prior to moving to Atlanta and taking charge of a much larger church than his old congregation, Ernest returned to New Orleans and the rented townhouse on the east side that served as Emma's temporary home.
New Orleans East was one of the areas to recover more slowly than others. There weren't a lot of people that lived there. It was a very, very desolate, very remote area.
And for Ernest, at least, it wasn't very safe either.
Within the week of him moving back to New Orleans, he was dead.
Coming up, the New Orleans police have no suspects.
Everybody loved Ernest. I didn't see him have any enemies.
But does that mean his death is a random robbery gone wrong?
It was almost the perfect place to commit a murder and get away with it.
At around midnight on April 12, 2006, 41-year-old Emma Smith called 911 and reported that her husband Ernest had just been shot, apparently right outside the couple's New Orleans home.
She said she heard what sounded like a popping sound, and she didn't think anything of it until she heard Mr. Ernest call and say, "Baby, I've been shot." And she said that's when she made her way downstairs to call 911.
When the New Orleans police arrived on the scene minutes later, they found the 38-year-old lying dead just inside his front door.
Ernest Smith is shot twice in the chest with a 9mm.
He fell inside of the apartment at the base of the stairs.
And based on where the investigators found 2 9mm shell casings, it appeared that his killer had been outside the house, waiting in ambush.
Those 2 shell casings are found outside, not far, but there's a sort of an alleyway that goes beside what appear to be apartments or like small townhouses all down a row.
But had someone specifically targeted the popular minister? Or was he merely another victim of the crime wave that surged through the city in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina? Emma said she had no idea. All she knew, according to what she told the police, was that Ernest had been out that night with his friend Ronald, attending bike night at a local bar.
Ernest Smith had just recently purchased a new motorcycle. He was learning how to ride a motorcycle. It was his first motorcycle.
And Ronald confirmed Emma's story when he arrived at the scene a few minutes later.
We received a phone call from Emma Smith stating that Mr. Ernest had been shot. And he made his way back to the scene.
Questioned by the police, Ronald said he dropped Ernest off at the apartment just minutes before the shooting.
Ronald tells us they come back to Ernest Smith's home, and they're outside sort of just having a conversation, talking about bike night and this, that, and the other.
Eventually, according to Ronald, Ernest had gotten out of the car and headed for his front door.
Ronald asked him, "So you sure you're going to make it, inside?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm safe. You can leave."
It wasn't an idle question, considering the city's semi-abandoned state in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
This particular portion of New Orleans East where they were living, it was a desolate, isolated area. The apartments were for the most part all vacant.
And despite his friend's assurances, Ronald said he'd even sat in his car and waited until Ernest reached his door.
He sees Ernest Smith go into his pocket, pull out his keys.
Then, according to Ronald, he drove away, apparently just moments before his friend was gunned down.
He said when he was on the interstate, after leaving Pastor Smith, he saw the police unit and he saw the EMS wagon. He didn't think anything of it.
The next thing that happens is he gets a phone call from Emma Rain saying that Ernest Smith has been shot. He says he's alarmed. He doesn't understand. He was just with him. There wasn't anybody out there.
But someone had been out there. And as a result, Ernest was dead.
I don't know if he was startled by the individual or if they called out his name or if they said anything to him, because he had to turn around to face them because the entry room was to the chest.
But who had attacked the up-and-coming minister? And why? That was the puzzling part.
Everybody loved Ernest. I didn't see him have any enemies. Never heard of anybody saying that they disliked him.
Only one thing was certain. The flood-ravaged neighborhood offered few answers.
This was a totally dead area where canvassing the neighborhood would have produced nothing.
It was almost the perfect place to commit a murder and get away with it.
And still struggling in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, there was little the New Orleans police could do about it.
It was a time when the city was sort of just processing scenes. If there was a suspect, they would move forward, but if not, the case went cold. They would move on to the next one.
Which is precisely what happened in Ernest Smith's case.
They go out and they do an initial investigation, and then basically they come to a dead end. They have no more leads, they have no more clues, they have really no suspects.
With no witnesses, no evidence other than a pair of shell casings, and no immediate suspects, the case went cold, and the police moved on.
Given what the police department was going through at the time, this goes by the wayside.
With her husband's murder still unsolved, Emma moved on too. Her kids were settled into new jobs and a new life in Texas, but she stayed in New Orleans, focused on her businesses. And in the aftermath of her husband's murder, she started spending more time with an old friend of Ernest, an army buddy named James Rain.
Him and James was in the same guard unit.
And in the wake of Ernest's murder, he was exactly what Emma needed to take her mind off the tragedy.
He was fun. He made people smile. He's very popular, and people just, it's like they flocked around him.
Emma and James started dating, and in 2000, building a house in James's hometown of Poplarville.
It was like 4,300 square foot, 4 or maybe 5 bedrooms, upstairs, swimming pool.
For Mississippi, it was extravagant. It was a $400,000 home.
Emma had finally found the life she dreamed of as a child.
They had nice cars. They even had a boat, nice boat.
But after tragically losing 2 husbands, would her third attempt to make a life for herself finally last? Or would another tragedy bring Emma's world crashing down? It was March of 2013, 7 years after Ernest Smith's murder, when Detective Jacinda Chambers' phone rang.
It was a cold case, a homicide detective, and investigate cases after they were a year old.
The caller was Enoch Rain, the brother of James Rain. He'd recently seen the detective on television, interviewed on a true crime TV series that profiles cold cases.
James Rain's family in Mississippi reached out telling her specifically that they had information on a New Orleans homicide.
The homicide of Pastor Ernest Smith, to be exact.
Detective Chambers, as you would expect, follows up on the lead. She goes and sits down and meets with these individuals.
Although, as it turned out, Ernest's murder wasn't the only one the family wanted to talk about. Coming up, tragedy strikes Emma again.
James Rain had been murdered.
But is it a coincidence? Or will the cold case investigation uncover even more victims?
He would be number 4.
By March of 2013, it had been 7 years since the unsolved murder of Emma Rain's second husband, Ernest Smith. The 38-year-old minister had been gunned down outside the couple's New Orleans apartment during the chaotic aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
As is the case with a lot of things that happened right after the storm, the case went cold, and eventually investigators just sort of put the case aside.
But one phone call had changed all that.
Detective Chambers gets a call from people who have some information about a homicide that took place in the city of New Orleans.
The caller was a man named Enoch Rain, the brother of Emma's third husband, James.
We put the ball rolling with contacting Jacinda Chambers, New Orleans Police Department.
However, the Ernest Smith case wasn't the only murder that Enoch was calling about.
They advised me that their brother James Rain had been murdered.
We want justice and to know what took place with James' murder.
James had been murdered in October of 2011 at the house in Poplarville while Emma was out of town visiting a client of her tax preparation business.
She had been trying to get in contact with him and she was unable to. So she called his mom and told his mom to go over to the house and check on him.
The mother goes there and is the one who ultimately finds him shot in the head in his bed.
Officially, the police in Mississippi had no leads, despite the fact that the couple's $500,000 home had been wired with security cameras.
The security system was down. It was unplugged. It was off.
And while Emma had been away when the murder occurred, the family was convinced that Emma had set the stage for James's killer before she left.
The last person to be seen on the surveillance cameras inside Emma and James's home is Emma Rain, and I believe it's the day before he is murdered, and she's seen in the image shutting the cameras off.
The security cameras weren't the only reason James's family suspected Emma either, because according to the family, it was no coincidence that Emma and James married just 2 years after the death of her second husband, Ernest Smith.
So her and James Rain had been in a physical relationship, certainly for some period of time before Ernest Smith is killed.
Could Emma and James's affair have led to Ernest's murder? According to the family, Ernest was aware of the relationship.
Family members of James Rain had heard him arguing on the phone with Ernest Smith, Ernest sort of telling him, look, stay away from my wife.
James's brother Enoch says he warned James to heed Ernest's words, that nothing but trouble could come from sleeping with another man's wife.
I told my brother, I said, do you know you flirting with death?
But it was Ernest who'd ended up dead. And within 2 years, James and Emma had gotten married, moved to Mississippi, and built a brand new house, a house that Ernest's death had essentially paid for.
They cashed in on the $800,000 insurance policy that she had taken out shortly before her husband's death.
Enoch said the family had been a little suspicious when the couple started throwing money around after Ernest's death.
I asked my brother, did he have anything to do with it?
James's answer had been no.
I said, you didn't have anything. And he told me again, no, I didn't. So I left it at that. We took him at his word because we're a family that's not wishy-washy. Say what you mean and mean what you say.
And according to Enoch, he now knew that James wasn't the one who killed Ernest. Enoch said that he learned the truth about Ernest's murder from a man named Terry Everett, who was practically a brother to James, too.
Him and James were very close. He was adopted by James' mother in his teenage years because his mother passed away.
When James died, Terry was living in Atlanta, but he had come home for the funeral. And after the service, Enoch and his uncle pulled Terry aside and told him what they suspected, that Emma was behind James's murder, and that James and Emma may have killed Ernest, too.
They say that Terry begins to weep, hysterically weep. And they ask him, what's going on? Calm yourself down. What's going on?
That's when the bombshell was dropped on us. He tells us he killed Ernest.
Enoch and his uncle were stunned.
The vehicle goes silent for a little while. And my next question was, why? And he said, James and Emma got me to do it.
According to Enoch, Terry said he had been promised a share of the money from Ernest's life insurance, but it was an empty promise.
His deal was $10,000 and he never even got that.
He instead said that he got 2 clunker cars.
Emma and James had married and spent the life insurance proceeds themselves, and now, more than 5 years later, James was dead too. As the reality of Terry's confession sank in, Enoch told Terry that he had to go to the police.
We told him, when you're ready, we'll go with you. Do everything we can to help you, but even if it came down to having to pay for a lawyer, we'd help you, but you got to do the right thing.
Still, according to Enoch and his uncle William, Terry had agreed.
And I think he did make the omission out of guilt and also that he was missing James.
But for all his guilt, Terry had never followed through.
6 months came, nothing. A year came, nothing. 18 months came, nothing. And at this time, I'm at the point where, we letting the murderer off the streets.
So in March of 2013, 7 years after Ernest's murder and almost 2 years after James had been killed, Enoch Rain and his uncle had contacted the New Orleans police.
These were decent, honest, hardworking people who simply wanted to convey something that had been sort of weighing on their mind for a time. They were having to give to the detective information about someone who was a family member. That's something that's very, very difficult.
They're snitching on their own family member, really. I mean, and to hear them talk about it, it really tore that family apart.
But was their story about Terry's confession true? According to Enoch, Terry had provided details.
We knew what type of gun. We knew how many times he was shot. And that was something that was never revealed in this case.
And he'd also described just how the murder had gone down.
He said, I was waiting in my car. I watched him talk to another guy for a while. He says as soon as the guy leaves, he pulls off. He gets out of his car. He shoots him twice in the chest.
After the crime was committed, Terry drove away back to Mississippi. As he was crossing over the bridge, over the Pontchartrain, he threw the murder weapon, the gun, into the lake.
It was consistent. Everything that they said that he confessed to was consistent.
Following up with members of Ernest's old congregation, the investigators also uncovered evidence that was consistent with the family's claim about Emma having an affair.
There were rumors from some of his members that she was no good, that she had boyfriends.
Emma's phone records, especially one call she made the night of Ernest's murder, just moments after talking to the police, provided additional evidence that pointed to the affair.
At that time, they don't know who she's calling. We later learned from her phone records she's calling James Rain in Mississippi.
But some of the most damning evidence had to do with Ernest's $800,000 insurance policy. Half of that money should have gone to Ernest's daughter from his first marriage, but it had all gone to Emma.
She forged Mr. Smith's daughter name to the insurance documents, which allowed Miss Emma Rain to receive the $800,000 insurance policy.
Ernest's daughter had sued over the fraud and won.
She actually hired a lawyer, and they did a forensic guy come in with the handwriting and found out that wasn't her handwriting.
Was collecting almost $1 million worth of insurance Emma's motive for murdering Ernest? That's what the New Orleans investigator thought.
I got the certified documents from the fraud case, and I applied for an arrest warrant for first-degree murder and solicitation for first-degree murder.
The judge also issued an arrest warrant for Terry Everett, who was picked up first on July 13th of 2013.
They found him working on a pipeline in Texas, and they extradited him from Texas to New Orleans, Louisiana, where he was booked accordingly.
But would Terry, who'd already confessed to James's family, cooperate with the police?
I spoke with him, and he cried like a baby. I had never seen a man cry the way he cried.
But for all his tears, Terry never talked.
Terry Everett, once he was arrested, did not make any statements to Detective Chambers.
Not that he didn't want to say anything. It was like shock. I can't say nothing. I just can't believe that I took part in something that led me here today.
The authorities arrested Emma 2 weeks later on August 1st in Kansas City, where she was living with a new husband. The marriage had occurred in December of 2012, exactly 14 months after James's murder, nearly 7 years after Ernest's murder, and 18 years after the death of Emma's first husband.
And the first thing came to my mind was that, well, he would be number 4.
In fact, Emma had such a long trail of dead husbands behind her that she was confused when the police placed her under arrest.
She needed clarification as to why she was being arrested. I told her this was about her husband, and her words to me were wood husband.
Coming up, is the case against Emma a long shot?
There's no physical evidence tying Emma to the case.
Or will Terry finally come through?
He still has a chance to do the right thing.
On August 10, 2016, 11 years after Hurricane Katrina swept New Orleans, 52-year-old Emma Rain stood trial for the decade-old murder of her second husband, Ernest Smith.
This case had been a cold case for several years.
And according to the prosecutor's opening statement, Emma's motivation for killing her husband was just as cold.
The motive that Emma Rain had was the insurance proceeds that she was going to get as a result of this man's death. She was a very cold and calculating individual. She was ruthless.
There was one problem with the prosecution's case, though, one that the defense was quick to point out in its opening statement.
There's no physical evidence tying Emma to the case. There's no ballistics. There's no blood. There's absolutely nothing.
Of course, they did have someone who could tie Emma to the murder, the alleged triggerman, Terry Everett. But would he testify?
Terry Everett, once he was arrested in connection with this, at no time was ever willing to cooperate with the prosecution.
And since he had been unwilling to cooperate, the district attorney had decided to try Terry first in December of 2014.
We had to win the case against him in order to have a chance against Emma Rain. So it was the building block on which the Emma Rain prosecution was based.
Although even getting a guilty verdict against Terry had been no slam dunk.
There were no witnesses. There was no weapon. There's no DNA. There's no surveillance footage. There's no financial record showing a sudden large unexplained increase in Terry's bank account. There's none of those things that you would look for.
What they did have, though, was moving testimony from the brother of Emma Rain's third husband, James Rain. Enoch Rain claimed that Terry had confessed to killing Ernest as part of a plot that Emma and James had put together in order to collect the insurance money.
I sit there on the stand and had to repeat what he told me. I love him to death, but I still couldn't look at the fact that he was just as cowardly as my brother James and Emma.
It broke his heart to have to testify, and so the jury realized that he would never have done that had it not been the truth, because it was torture.
And that had been enough to seal Terry's fate.
He was found guilty of second-degree murder.
But would the life sentence he was facing be the leverage the prosecutors needed?
They offered us, if he would cooperate, to somehow work out a sentence for 40 years. Terry did not want to take that.
Still, despite his refusal to cooperate, the prosecutors called the convicted murderer as a witness during Emma's trial.
He still has a chance to do the right thing.
But would he take it?
It was a very dramatic moment. He was shackled, handcuffed on his wrists and ankles, and he refused to take the witness stand.
He sat with his attorneys, kept his head down. He didn't say anything.
Terry may not have willingly cooperated, But his silent show of defiance played right into the prosecution's hands.
We had to place on the record that he's refusing to answer in order for us to legally be allowed to impeach him with the statement that he had made to his family members.
Without Terry's refusal to testify on record, any testimony from the family about his confession would be hearsay. But since they'd given Terry the opportunity to testify and he refused, the prosecution was able to put members of the Rain family on the stand to recount the details of the murder plot that Terry had confessed to them.
She coerced and set this plan up and got him caught up, Terry caught up in it, and I feel for him.
And to explain Emma's motive for murdering her husband, the prosecution also presented a detailed analysis of how, prior to the murder, she had dramatically increased the amount of Ernest's life insurance.
She starts to increase the life insurance policies slowly, but in drastic amounts for Ernest Smith, up until the point where she's at $800,000. The last bump came, I believe it was just 4 months before his death.
The prosecutor also explained that after the murder, Emma and her daughter, now in her 30s, had committed forgery to cheat Ernest's daughter out of her rightful share of the insurance money.
She has her daughter go in and forge the signature, signing over her half of the $800,000 to Emma Rain.
It wasn't speculation either. By the time Emma stood trial, her daughter had already pleaded guilty to fraud charges stemming from the forgery.
I imagine the only reason she did it was because of the pressure that her mama put up on her.
To elicit your child to sign or to forge a document that shed a different light on the investigation, to show the means at which she would go through to get basically what she wanted.
And according to the prosecutors, there was only one thing that Emma wanted.
The money, the greed. This is what these crimes were about.
The fact that somebody could be so driven by money, I think, was really horrifying, that they would be willing to literally destroy the lives of people that they loved in exchange for money.
In fact, the prosecutors were convinced that Emma had destroyed more than one life.
It was not just about Ernest Smith. She had made her living killing husbands.
Not only had Emma's third husband, James Rain, been murdered too, there was also the tragic accident that had almost killed her first husband.
It was a mysterious sort of possibly hit and run. No one was really sure who was responsible. It rendered him a paraplegic.
Was the fact that he'd lived merely a glitch in Emma's plan? That's what her first husband's family suspected, when a year later he choked to death on his feeding tube while lying in bed.
The mother and the deceased's brother tell us that the last person to be in the room with him was Emma Rain.
Her first husband's family also wondered whatever became of his life insurance.
They did not receive any money from his life insurance. They believed that there was a policy in place and that she likely collected. We just simply had tried to find documentation to support that, and we were not able to. We always kind of suspected that that was her first taste at how easy it might have been to receive financial gains at the death of her husband.
However, since they couldn't find any documentation, the judge didn't allow the prosecutors to present the evidence from her first husband's death to the jury.
There just simply wasn't enough evidence there to support that he had died at her hands.
However, the prosecutors were allowed to present evidence of the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of James Rain.
The jury could consider this other evidence to determine whether or not this was consistent with her character, her motive, her interest, her intent.
And according to the prosecution, whether it was 2 murders or 3, the pattern was the same.
You don't get a lot of Black Widow cases. It's kind of fascinating.
Or was it possible that she was just a victim of circumstance and a series of tragic coincidences? According to the defense, the murders of Ernest Smith and James Rain did have something in common, that Emma wasn't involved in either of them.
Essentially, they say that there is no evidence that Emma Rain had anything to do with this,
For starters, they claimed that there was nothing sinister about Emma increasing the amount of Ernest Smith's life insurance.
She claimed when he got a motorcycle that was the reason to increase his life insurance.
And Terry Everett's emotional confession to James Rain's family. According to the defense, it was possible Terry and James had conspired to kill Ernest without Emma.
In the defense's case, they portrayed James to be the evil one who planned all of this. They claimed that the insurance proceeds were supposed to go to James, who ultimately they say is the evil mastermind.
And since Emma didn't take the stand when the case went to the jury on August 12th, the decision essentially came down to one thing: the credibility of a convicted murderer's confession to a bereaved family.
Unless the jury was able to believe the statement made by Everett, there would have been no foundation for the trial against Emma Rain.
Coming up, will Terry's secondhand confession be enough to convict Emma?
If not, this woman was going to destroy somebody else's family.
Or will the jury get hung up on hearsay?
Her defense attorney really felt like he had a good argument.
On August 12, 2016, the jury in Emma Rain's murder trial announced that it had reached a verdict. The 52-year-old was charged with orchestrating the murder of her second husband, Ernest Smith, and she was suspected in the deaths of her first and third husbands, too.
The Black Widow aspect was fascinating for both police, prosecutors, and the media. People were very interested, just sort of horrified at the fact that this had happened so many times.
But would the jury believe Emma had killed one husband, much less all three?
I got the impression that she felt she was going to get off.
Her defense attorney really felt like he had a good argument that she wasn't involved and that it was an unfair prosecution.
After all, the entire case against Emma hinged on the confession that convicted triggerman Terry Everett had made to her third husband's family.
It's been a heartbreaking experience for them. They had to testify and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what he had told them.
I know how we feel as a family. We want justice, because if not, this woman was going to destroy somebody else's family.
But would the family get the justice they sought? It all came down to the jury's verdict.
Emma Rain was found guilty by a jury of second-degree murder.
She had no reaction really to the verdict.
But for the family of Emma's third husband, James Rain, the jury's decision came as a huge relief.
That guilty verdict, I'm talking about a weight lifted off. You can't bring people back, but knowing what I knew, that when they said guilty with her, it was lifted.
And she would be going away for a long time, too. On October 21st, the judge sentenced Emma to life without parole. And Emma only has herself to blame. According to the prosecutors, if she had stopped with Ernest's murder, Terry never would have confessed, and James's family wouldn't have gone to the police.
To find people who do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do is such a rare thing for us to find in this business.
If it had not been for that break, Emma Rain would still be out there.
Although in hindsight, James's brother wonders who made the bigger mistake. Emma for murdering James, or James for marrying Emma.
What the hell was you thinking? You just been a part of helping this woman murder her husband. What in the world you didn't think you was going to be next?
Dawn Silvernail seemed like an ordinary suburban woman.
She was just a regular person.
She has a job working with mentally challenged kids.
Though her longtime friend, Fred Ambrose, had a shadier reputation.
This guy was involved in all kinds of unsavory things.
Then, one of Fred's co-workers was gunned down leaving choir practice.
Other choir members heard the shots.
The ensuing investigation would expose a slew of scandalous secrets, almost too shocking to believe.
This was no random act. She was targeted.
There's talk about bribes, numerous affairs. They had sex, the three of them, in the town water pumping station.
And by the end, everyone in town would know that Dawn Silvernail was anything but ordinary.
It's like a soap opera. It really is in small town America.
Pleasant Valley, New York, October 28, 1999. It was a peaceful autumn evening in this quiet rural community just outside Poughkeepsie in New York's picturesque Hudson Valley.
100 miles from New York City is a rural, very quiet kind of place.
And it's one of those places where when you pull into town, it has the Kiwanis sign, the church meeting sign.
And at 8:45 that Thursday night, choir practice had just ended, and 48-year-old Susan Bassett walked out of the Pleasant Valley United Methodist Church.
She was involved in her church. She sang in the choir. She was liked around town.
Which made what happened once Susan crossed the street and got into her car doubly shocking. At first, the other members of the choir paid little attention to the noise.
They thought it was fireworks.
But then someone noticed Susan, slumped over the steering wheel of her car, and covered in blood.
And then over there, they realized what had happened.
Susan had just been shot.
Maybe there's a woman coming out of choir practice at a rural church, and she's gunned down.
And even as they rushed to give aid and summon help, some of the choir members spotted the shooter's getaway.
The suspect's vehicle was seen leaving the immediate area.
They get glimpses of it. They see partial license plate.
That partial plate was just the first clue in the search for Susan's killer.
This was no random act. She was targeted.
And the investigation would lead through a tangle of small-town corruption, double crosses, and kinky sex to the woman who just might hold the key to the mystery, 50-year-old Dawn Silvernail. Born in 1949, Dawn Mudge grew up across the Hudson from Pleasant Valley in New York's Catskill Mountains.
Dawn was kind of a country girl, you know, and she wasn't very sophisticated.
Nearly 6 feet tall by the time she was a teenager, she was also quite a tomboy.
Used to like to take target practice in her backyard with pistols and rifles, have campfires, and, you know, she liked the simple life, really.
And her life after high school followed a pretty simple small-town trajectory, too. A couple of years of community college, a marriage at 21, and after a few years at home raising the couple's son, a career of her own.
Dawn worked for a nonprofit agency that helps the developmentally disabled.
She liked to work with mentally challenged kids.
To unwind from her demanding job, Dawn moonlighted as a country music singer.
She used to do, like, singing in a bar.
She also turned to a craze that was sweeping the nation in the late 70s, the analog version of internet chat rooms, citizens band radio.
It's almost like meeting somebody online today. You don't see him, you present this persona, you present who you want to be.
The would-be lounge singer took her CB handle from a chart-topping country western song.
Her name on the CB was Delta Dawn.
And in 1977, 28-year-old Delta Dawn started chatting over the radio with a man who called himself Neptune. Only 5'6", Fred Andros was hardly godlike, but Neptune was an apt nickname nonetheless.
Fred was the town of Poughkeepsie water supervisor.
He ran the water department. And when it came to getting a building permit in Poughkeepsie, Fred really did wield godlike power. If contractors wanted to get hookups to the town water system, they had to see Fred. And Fred made it very clear that they would need his cooperation. There's talk about bribes.
Hey, give me $500 or I'll shut your water off.
However, the rumor that he was on the take wasn't the only or even the juiciest bit of gossip swirling around Fred. Despite being married, Neptune was known to be a ladies' man.
He had affairs always, all the time, different women.
He was a powerful man. He was in many ways a charismatic man. And in a sense, his power, his charisma made him very attractive. Although contrary to Fred's reputation, his relationship with Dawn started out innocently enough.
They would talk to each other on TV, and they became friends.
Fred even took his wife to watch Dawn sing at a honky-tonk.
They went to see her, and they became friends.
But despite the fact that they were both married, Dawn's relationship with Fred evolved from friends to friends with benefits.
When Fred wanted sex, and he didn't have anybody else, and he wanted to cheat on his wife, Dawn was always there.
She didn't love him, but they used each other.
For Dawn, it was a lucrative relationship.
Dawn would show up at Fred's office and say, "Fred, can I borrow a couple $100?" She always went to Fred when she needed something.
And Fred was always more than happy to oblige. Consequently, he held a lot of power over her, and he got her to do a number of things in the name of that debt that she owed. However, not all the favors he asked in return were sexual in nature.
He'd say, "Sure, can you drop this off on your way out? Can you drop this off to Joe Smith's house for me?" She'd say, "Sure." She'd drop the envelope off.
The envelopes typically contained cash, the proceeds from Fred's shakedown racket.
It might not be organized crime, but it was organized bribery and extortion.
She liked the idea of being able to vicariously live this life.
And when her marriage ended in divorce, Dawn continued to see Fred and run his illicit errands.
If you're connected to an important person. And that's what Fred had told himself he'd be. If she could do favors for him and make a little money from him or borrow money from him, that gave her some degree of importance. And I really think that was their connection.
The relationship continued for more than a decade, even after 42-year-old Dawn remarried in 1992 to a man named Ed Silvername.
I knew him to be a hardworking guy. He was close to his parents.
The owner of a small-town appliance store, Ed was solid and stable, but Dawn couldn't seem to give up the thrill of her affair with Fred.
She was looking for excitement in her marriage and her life. Her husband wasn't providing.
Although Dawn and Fred's lives were about to get far more exciting than the occasional illicit hookup and envelopes stuffed with cash. It started in 1997 with a dead body in the water. The town assessor was found floating in the Hudson River. His death was officially ruled a suicide. The suicide occurred a day or two after the FBI had confronted him to talk to him and see if they could get him to cooperate and give information on other town officials. Although considering the circumstances, there were plenty of rumors that the assessor's death wasn't a suicide, and Fred started many of them.
Fred started the rumor that he arranged to have this guy killed to shut up.
He wanted to be a godfather. That was his dream.
Whether the rumor was true or not, the feds quickly took notice.
They started following him around, and they had a file on him.
I remember seeing cars across the street in the parking lot watching.
However, despite all Fred's kingpin pretensions, his water permits for brides racket wasn't what the feds were after. The main focus of the inquiry was the town's Republican chairman. He was the guy, apparently, who was ordering the shakedown contractors. What the FBI wanted from Fred was cooperation.
There was supposedly another guy who was much bigger, and was running a corruption scandal on a much broader scale that Fred was connected to. So they were trying to use Fred to get to this guy.
And by the spring of 1999, the feds had enough evidence against Fred to force his cooperation.
He actually called me and told me to come to his house. He needed to talk to me. And when I got there, he said, I need to tell you, I'm probably going to be arrested. It really wasn't a big shock to any of us.
Everybody knew that Fred Andros was this bully who would shake people down.
Nailed by the feds, Fred quickly cut a deal that would keep him out of jail, even if it did cost him his job.
Fred resigned in May of 1999 from 33 years in the town water department. The next day, he pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy. And as part of that, he was to cooperate and be a witness.
But the end of Fred Andros' career was about to be eclipsed by an even bigger scandal in Poughkeepsie, involving another town official. Her name was Susan Fassett.
She worked in the town of Poughkeepsie Town Hall.
And her death would expose the sordid underbelly of life in this otherwise picturesque suburban community.
We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Lots of people hold secrets, even in small towns.
Coming up, the hunt for Susan's killer results in a standoff.
The town of Poughkeepsie, their SWAT team respond
As police uncover another suspect, a shocking secret, and an unlikely motive.
They realize, wow, we got one hell of a convoluted investigation.
Pleasant Valley, New York, October 28, 1999. It was not quite 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening when 48-year-old Susan Fassett was gunned down in a parking lot as she left choir practice at the Pleasant Valley United Methodist Church.
As soon as Susan sits down in her car and straps her seatbelt on, shots ring out.
There were a number of other choir members that had heard the shots.
Police and EMTs were on the scene within minutes.
She's still breathing. She's still alive when they put her in that ambulance.
And even as the EMTs fought to save Susan's life, the investigators were already tracking down a crucial clue that could lead to the shooter. Several members of the choir had spotted the suspect fleeing the scene.
They see a car taking off up the hill.
Not only did the investigators know they were looking for a metallic-colored station wagon, at least one member of the choir had given them a partial license plate number.
You got a general description of which way it left the scene coming out of the parking lot where the actual shooting took place. But other than that, we had very little to work with at the time.
But was it enough? When the investigators ran the plate, they came up with a possible match. Susan's husband.
The car was registered to Jeff Fassett.
And since Jeff Fassett was a lieutenant in the Poughkeepsie Police Department, law enforcement proceeded with caution.
The town of Poughkeepsie, their SWAT team respond to Jeff's residence.
They have a cop inside of a house, and they think he might have shot his wife. And they know he's got one weapon.
Jeff Fassett soon spotted the SWAT team massing outside his house, resulting in a tense standoff.
He drew the shades in the house. He talked on the phone about having a gun. He was uncertain about what had happened. He was asking questions that rose our suspicion.
Meanwhile, Susan Fassett is at the hospital, right? Struggling to survive.
It was a struggle she would lose.
We're advised that she was dead.
Soon after, the SWAT team stormed in and took her husband into custody.
Jeff was physically removed from the house at gunpoint.
Once he was cuffed in the back of a cruiser, the authorities transported Jeff to a nearby state police barracks for questioning.
They begin to ask what's going on in the marriage. Is there a motivation here? And oh boy, did they get a story.
Jeff denied any involvement in his wife's death, but he told the police that just a month earlier, he had discovered that Susan had been having an affair.
He and Susan talked about it. Jeff confronted her about it.
She asked for forgiveness. They seemed to be getting back together. They had agreed to have new wedding bands made to start fresh.
And since his wife had supposedly broken it off, Jeff suggested that the investigators talk to Susan's jilted lover, Poughkeepsie's former water supervisor, Fred Andrews.
He said, this is a guy you definitely want to talk to.
This guy was involved in all kinds of unsavory things, criminal and otherwise. He had a reputation of floating out the fact that he was connected to the mob, the implication being he could have people hurt, have them killed.
Did Susan's affair with Fred Andrews have something to do with her murder?
Everybody in and around the town of Poughkeepsie knew who Fred Andrews was.
And they knew his reputation, both as a corrupt official on the take and as a ladies' man.
Fred is running around with Susan. He's running around with Dawn.
Or was it possible Susan's husband was counting on Fred's reputation to divert suspicion from him? Based on Jeff's behavior in the interrogation room, the investigators didn't think so.
He felt that he was being honest. He was cooperative.
He never requested an attorney.
He also agreed to take a polygraph.
The average polygraph test can take 2 to 3 hours. This ran 5 or 6, maybe a little bit more.
At the same time, the investigators went looking for Fred Andrews.
It was roughly 2, 3 in the morning. We decided to go knock on Fred's door.
He appeared genuinely distraught over Susan's death.
He was emotional. He cried. He was very upset over it.
He said that he loved her.
Fred confirmed that he and Susan had been seeing each other for almost 4 years, and that the affair had ended over a month ago, just as her husband claimed.
One of the questions asked early on was, when was the last time you had sexual relations with her? And he claimed it had been quite some time.
But when the investigators asked Fred whether he had killed Susan, he said no, and that he could prove it.
He had a perfect alibi. He was having dinner, he was home, and he had some close friends over. One of them was a city of Poughkeepsie police officer.
There's no way Fred Andrews could have killed this woman.
And after a grueling 6-hour polygraph examination, it appeared that there was no way Susan's husband had killed her either.
The polygraphist was comfortable that he was telling the truth, and we basically ruled him out.
But what about the witnesses that had seen Jeff Bassett's car fleeing the scene? It was a mistake.
There were some miscommunications running license plates.
In the confusion, the officer at the crime scene had accidentally given dispatch the license plate number of the victim's car, which was registered in her husband's name.
That led some police to believe that it was the car belonging to Jeff Bassett that actually left the scene.
As a result, the investigators had 2 men with a possible motive to kill Susan Bassett, and neither of them could have pulled the trigger.
They realized, wow, we got one hell of a convoluted investigation.
And when the medical examiner finished Susan's autopsy, the result was another unexpected twist. There was no surprise about how Susan had died. She had been shot 6 times with a .45 caliber pistol.
The first round severed both carotid arteries.
Instead, the surprise was what Susan had been doing before the shooting.
Susan Bassett had sex within 24 hours of her death.
The question was, who had she been sleeping with? Was it the husband she had supposedly reconciled with? Or Fred Andrews, the man who claimed to be her former lover? It apparently wasn't her husband Jeff, based on what he told the investigators when they dropped by his house later that day.
I asked Jeff the last time he had relations. He indicated to me it had been at least 4 or 5 days.
And when the detective asked him for a DNA sample, the police lieutenant knew what that meant. Less than a month after their reconciliation, Susan had already been unfaithful.
The look on his face, it was terrible.
But when the investigators asked Fred for a DNA sample on November 4th, he was far less cooperative than Jeff.
He wouldn't offer a DNA sample, so he had to talk to his lawyer.
Rebuffed by Fred, the detectives decided to try an indirect approach.
We made a decision to take him out and get him lunch.
We were going to get his DNA sample from a straw.
And when one of the detectives asked Fred to meet him for lunch so they could discuss the case, he fell for the ruse.
They test that DNA, and they find out that Fred was the one who had sex with Susan Fassett last.
As police suspected, the DNA was a match, and Fred had lied.
That's not two people who were breaking apart. That's two people who were back together again.
But if Fred and Susan were still seeing one another on the sly, why would he kill her? Was it possible her death had nothing to do with the affair? After all, Fred had been busted as part of the FBI's ongoing investigation of Poughkeepsie city government.
The feds are working on this corruption case for many, many years.
Was it possible that Susan had some dirt on Fred? Something that could violate the plea bargain he'd made with the feds?
The police begin to hear stories about, well, maybe Susan was involved with Fred in some of this corruption that he was involved in, passing envelopes around.
One thing was certain, however. No matter what Susan's involvement was, the fact that Fred had cut a deal with the feds gave them considerable leverage over the former water supervisor.
He had signed a participation agreement with the feds that he would cooperate in any investigation, otherwise his plea agreement was going to get thrown out.
They can really put the squeeze on him.
So soon after the DNA test confirmed that Fred had slept with Susan shortly before her death, the investigators went to the FBI.
We sat down with the FBI, explained to them that this guy's lying to us on this homicide investigation.
Intrigued by what they heard, the FBI agreed to cooperate with the local police. On December 21st, they brought Fred in for questioning. And as expected, the federal agents did put the squeeze on him.
He was there all day until about 10 o'clock at night.
And they started to ask him questions about their case, the corruption case. But through that, he's asked, was Susan running envelopes? Because there's some stories around that Susan was transporting money for Fred. And is that why she wound up dead?
At first, Fred tried to stall.
He was giving them just enough where he was hoping they'd believe him. I think he was being honest and move on.
But eventually, as the hours ticked by, Fred's resistance began to crumble.
He was tired, very, very tired.
And sensing that Fred was about to break after the grueling all-day session, the agents turned up the heat.
Look, Fred, you're going to go to jail for a long time. Probably the rest of your life.
They were going to remove the deal that he had. It was about to be pulled off the table.
The pressure was really ratcheting up.
But they also offered him a way out. Name Susan's killer.
And that's when he does it. Bang! Dawn Silverman.
Coming up, the investigators uncover a sordid trail of secrets.
Sets up a couple lights, puts a video camera on.
But will it lead them to the killer in time?
He was face down in the carpet
with a pool of blood under his head.
On December 21st, 1999, almost 2 months after Susan Fassett had been gunned down while leaving choir practice in Pleasant Valley, New York, the investigators had finally made a breakthrough. During a day-long interrogation by the FBI, Susan's lover, a disgraced Poughkeepsie city official named Fred Andros, had given the authorities what he claimed was a solid lead.
He identified the shooter. He was Dawn Silverman.
However, there was one small problem with Fred's claim.
Who the hell was Dawn? They hadn't even heard the name.
Had Fred just thrown out a name in hopes of saving himself? That's what at least one of the investigators thought after they pulled up Dawn's DMV photo.
My impression, we looked at her picture. She doesn't look like a murderer. What is Fred talking about?
But the part the police had the hardest time believing was the 50-year-old's supposed motive for murder. According to Fred, Dawn was Susan's jilted lover.
They were carrying on a lesbian relationship? This is Pleasant Valley. This is suburbia.
However, when the police dug a little deeper into their database, they discovered two facts that lent at least some credence to Fred's story. The first had to do with the murder weapon, a .45 caliber pistol.
She does, in fact, have a 45 registered to her.
The second had to do with the getaway vehicle witnesses described.
Her husband had a vehicle registered to him that generally fit the description of the car leaving the scene.
So on December 23rd, 1999, the investigators made the hour drive up into the Catskills to question Dawn at the home she shared with her husband.
Dawn brought us in, sat us down, asked us if we wanted anything to drink, coffee, anything like that, being perfect host.
And once Dawn and the detectives sat down to coffee, she was extremely cooperative.
Said, our records indicate that you have a 45 caliber. Well, she jumped out of her chair. Absolutely. I'll go get it. She removed the gun, handed it to me.
Dawn also admitted to knowing Fred Ambrose, although according to her, they were just friends.
They were friendly. It was a casual acquaintance. They would talk on the CBs when CBs were popular, that kind of thing.
But she denied knowing Susan Bassett at all. And she seemed shocked when the investigators told her that Fred had implicated her in the woman's murder.
She appeared surprised by that. I don't know why to say that. I would never harm a fly. I wouldn't hurt anybody.
Considering Fred's shady reputation, the fact that Dawn was a married woman who worked with disabled children, and that she had just voluntarily turned over her gun, the police were inclined to believe her.
She couldn't have been more cooperative than she was.
But was there a reason Dawn had no problem giving the police her gun? When the investigators turned it over to the ballistics examiner, he immediately noticed something wrong. Someone had tampered with the gun's barrel.
They poured it out with a drill press or a Dremel tool. There's only one reason to do that, and that's so the police won't be able to do a ballistic test on it.
But did that mean Dawn really was Susan's killer? Or had someone set her up?
Maybe Dawn hadn't done this. Maybe Dawn loaned her gun to either Ambrose or some third party that we didn't know.
On December 28th, the investigators asked Dawn to come in for another interview. And Dawn, cooperative as ever, readily agreed.
Once we tell her that the barrel of that gun had been tampered with, her demeanor changed. She was more anxious, more concerned.
She was more honest, too, admitting that she had been cheating on her husband with Fred Ambrose.
Dawn Silvernail was one more female in Fred Ambrose's life.
But while the affair was sexual, Dawn said it wasn't exactly romantic.
She called Fred her little troll.
She told the police that she slept with Fred strictly to pay off the money he had loaned her over the years.
She said that she had owed him a great deal of money, something like $5,000.
However, according to Dawn, she didn't just work off her debt by having sex with Fred.
Andrews had paid her money to have sex with his friends.
Dawn claimed that not all of Fred's friends were male either. She told the investigators that in the summer of 1999, Fred had approached her with a new proposition.
I want you to have sex with this woman that I'm involved with, and I'm going to videotape it.
Andrews offered her $350 cash to participate.
This was Fred's idea, to get the two women together for his own sexual appetite.
According to Dawn, the other woman was Susan Bassett.
They had sex, the three of them, in the town water pumping station.
It was just like something they did a couple of times to please Fred. But that they ended up liking. And it was exciting, it was new, it was fresh.
Dawn said she and Susan had performed for Fred on several occasions. But she also claimed that by the end of the summer, Susan had started to have second thoughts, and not just about the menage a trois.
Susan begins to talk about, maybe I should get back with my husband. This isn't working out, Fred. We're just not meant to be together.
Susan had broken up with him, and nobody breaks up with Fred Andrews.
And when the investigators pressed Dawn further,
She finally just cracks and says, I shot that woman, I shot that woman, I shot that woman. But I didn't do it on my own.
Dawn said Fred was the mastermind behind it.
He said this will eliminate your debt.
Dawn said she had initially refused, causing Fred to resort to blackmail.
Fred said, I have these videotapes of you and this other woman, and I'll show them to everybody.
And Dawn claimed that when blackmail didn't work, Fred had started making veiled threats against her family.
For example, he took a photograph of her son on a break from his factory job, shows it to Dawn when he's trying to coerce her into committing murder on his behalf. And he said this would be a good place for a drive-by.
When she saw those pictures of her son, that was it. She was ready to kill someone else in order to save her son's life.
According to Dawn, that was why she had killed Susan outside her church.
Dawn sits there, just gives it all up.
Dawn's confession was more than enough for the police to arrest her on murder charges.
She's gunned down the woman, mother, the wife, in cold blood, shot her with a 45 caliber.
She's placed in jail. And she knows her one hope is that she can go into court, tell this story, and that her sentencing will be life.
But would she tell that story as a defendant or a witness for the prosecution? The next day, December 29th, police pounded on Fred Ambros's door.
No one answered.
But that didn't stop the investigators.
We had our warrants. We had what we needed, and we came in anyway.
Once inside, the investigators fanned out and searched the house.
I saw Fred's wallet. His pager was there. There was every indication that Fred was there in the house.
Then, one of the investigators climbed the stairs to the attic.
You could see dust moving. Somebody had just moved from the top of that stairwell. And I basically announced that I was going to come up to talk to him.
And he's calling Fred's name out. Fred, we got you. You give it up.
But the disgraced city official wasn't about to give up, at least not to the police. And when the investigators burst into the attic moments later,
that was Fred, face down in the carpet, gun next to him.
There was a pool of blood under his head.
Fred had just shot himself.
I'm thinking this thing's over.
Coming up, Dawn goes to court.
You could hear a pin drop as she told her story.
But it's not her story that shocks the courtroom.
There was an audible gasp in the room.
On January 29, 2001, the accused murderer of Susan Sassett went on trial at the Dutchess County Courthouse in Poughkeepsie, New York.
We're comfortable that we had a pretty good case.
However, the person the prosecutors were presenting the case against wasn't the woman who had confessed to the shooting. Dawn spilled her name. It was Fred Ambrose, a disgraced city official who had resigned from his position after pleading guilty to corruption. Fred had attempted suicide a year earlier when police came to his house to arrest him.
Fred tried to take the coward's way out and kill himself.
However, he had miraculously survived the self-inflicted wound.
Underneath the chin, came out through the nose. He had a lot of soft tissue damage to the face.
It was unbelievable how he did not have any brain damage. He wasn't blind. He could see.
Although when he walked into court after a year's worth of reconstructive surgery, few people recognized the town's self-described ladies' man.
There was actually an audible gasp in the room when he walked in the first time.
He really looks like a disfigured man at this point. I mean, he really looks bad.
They had to reconstruct his nose.
Dawn wasn't in the courtroom, however. She was sequestered outside, waiting for her turn to testify against Fred.
She had made a plea deal with the district attorney's office.
Dawn had pled guilty to the murder, but in exchange for her testimony, the prosecutors had agreed to a reduced sentence. 18 years to life instead of the maximum 25 to life.
Would have liked to have given her the max, but we needed her.
In its open, the prosecutors claimed that Fred had orchestrated Susan's death after she had dared to break off her affair with him.
He was the person behind the death of Susan Fassett, even if he did not pull the trigger on the gun.
The defense countered by presenting a very similar scenario, although they cast Dawn as the jilted lover.
The defense was trying to contend that Dawn did this of her own volition, perhaps because she and Susan Fassett had had a lesbian affair.
And according to the defense, Fred's disgraced reputation made him the perfect scapegoat.
The defense theory is that Dawn realized that she could possibly frame Fred for it.
However, when Dawn took the stand to testify against Fred, she hardly seemed like the sort to mastermind such a crime.
She had short, rather unstylish hair. She was overweight. She was just a regular person who got caught up in something.
And her remorse at being caught up in Fred's fiendish plot appeared heartfelt.
I'm sorry that I killed that woman. I ruined families' lives. I took this woman away from her kids, away from her husband.
Dawn said she had only been trying to protect her family.
Dawn claimed they would be harmed if she didn't do exactly what Fred told her to do.
Dawn is married to a guy she really loves. She has a job working with mentally challenged kids. Will all that blow up on her if this secret is revealed of who she is?
Then, before the hushed courtroom, Dawn recounted just how she had waited in ambush while Susan finished choir practice.
She sat in the front seat of the car, pulled the seat back.
She has her pistol on her lap.
Dawn said that Susan didn't see her when she walked across the street from the church.
With Susan not in her car, Dawn sat up.
And according to Dawn, she immediately started firing at her former lover through the car's open window.
Dawn said she just kept pulling the trigger till the gun was empty.
You could hear a pin drop as she told her story.
She is a riveting witness. I mean, there's tears. She gives the whole narrative of what happened. Never misses a beat.
Then, once the gun was empty, Dawn had driven away as quickly as she could.
She stopped at a payphone and paged Fred a certain code, his pager, and that would tell Fred that the job was done, that Susan was dead.
Dawn said that after the shooting, Fred had drilled out the gun to foil the ballistics and taken other steps to cover their tracks.
He actually paid for Dawn to get 4 new tires, thinking that we would be able to get tire tracks at the scene.
She gives him detail after detail.
But would Dawn's detailed account be enough to ensure Fred's conviction?
The jury has to believe that, yes, she killed her, but yes, she's telling the whole truth here.
On cross, the defense did its best to discredit Dawn.
What Fred's attorneys do, they attack Dawn's deal.
Dawn was a killer here. Dawn got the plea bargain. Dawn got the reduced sentence. The legal system couldn't hold Fred accountable for what Dawn Silvernail did to Susan Bassett.
Then, when it was the defense's turn to present their case, they called Fred to the stand.
It was clear when Dawn Silvernail was finished testifying that she had made a very powerful impact, and that the defense would have to come back with something very strong in order to counter it. And the defense strategy to counter it was to put Fred Andros on the stand in hopes that Fred could go head-to-head with Dawn.
However, contrary to Dawn's compelling performance, Fred came across as a broken man.
Fred stammered. He reversed course. He wasn't clear. He would say, well, I shot myself, so I don't have all my memory.
Although, as Fred explained to the jury, it wasn't guilt that led him to attempt suicide rather than face arrest. It was the hopelessness of his situation.
He lost everything. He lost his job. He lost his esteem in the community.
He was just so broken down and so tired.
According to Fred, the fact that he was about to be arrested for a crime he didn't commit was just too much to take.
He didn't have anything to do with it. It was or on Dawn Silvernail and her alone.
And the idea that his jealousy had led to Susan's death? Fred testified that it simply wasn't the case, and the police had the DNA test to prove it.
Fred says, I had sex with her the day before she died. Why would I want to kill her?
Coming up, the jury reaches its verdict.
The jury came back within hours.
But whose story will they believe?
Dawn Silvernail did hold the fate of Fred Andros in her hand.
On February 23, 2001, the jury announced that it had reached a verdict in the trial of disgraced Poughkeepsie, New York City official Fred Andros.
The jury came back within hours.
Fred was on trial for masterminding the October 1999 murder of Susan Fassett, the wife of a Poughkeepsie police officer. Susan and Fred had been having a sordid three-way affair with Dawn Silvernail, Susan's confessed killer.
It's like a soap opera. It really is in small town America.
It's a story of political intrigue. It's a story of very powerful people laid low. It's a story of sex and violence.
At trial, Fred had testified that the killing was entirely Dawn's doing, that the fact that he'd had sex with Susan less than 24 hours before her death proved that he had no motive for murder. Or was that, as the prosecutors had argued in their closing, all part of Fred's plan?
He manipulated Susan to get back together with him again so he could have sex with her, just so he could prove that he was still with her. Why would I want her dead? Just so he could later say that. That's who Fred Andros is.
In the end, it all came down to Fred's word versus Dawn. And when he finished telling the sad story of his attempted suicide, it was obvious Fred figured he had won the jury's sympathy.
He walks away with his chest sticking out like this cocky man, thinking they bought it.
Only they didn't. When the verdict was read, the jury found Fred Andros guilty of Susan's murder.
Ultimately, Dawn Silvernail did hold the fate of Fred Andros in her hand. She's the one who put him away.
Although she didn't put him away for long, despite the fact that he received a sentence of 25 years to life.
Within 2 years, he died of a heart attack.
He wasn't a healthy man when he went in.
In the years since his death, Fred's daughter has come to accept the jury's verdict.
I think he did what they said he did. I think my biggest regret is being nice to him towards the end, when he was in jail.
And Dawn Silvernail, the woman who killed Susan and whose testimony put Fred in prison, she not only has to serve her time, she has to live with what she's done.
Even though she got the last word, she paid dearly for what she did on behalf of Fred Andros.
She has nightmares every night about this woman and about what she did. She relives this crime over and over in her head.
Dawn Silvernail was released on parole in December 2017 at the age of 68. She currently lives in Newfane, New York.
Rose Chase was different.
She's pretty much always been an outcast.
But so was her husband, Adam.
They were into the sci-fi type stuff, and they just kind of clicked. They were very happy together.
But then, after 11 years of marriage, Rose's husband vanished.
She just said he walked out, left his cell phone, his car, everything.
Was it simply a spat?
He went to blow off some steam somewhere.
Or was something else going on?
Call it a mother's intuition.
We weren't going to find him alive.
The search would reveal the truth about their marriage.
They were kissing and touching in a way that she shouldn't be doing.
Expose a shocking secret.
She always says I couldn't make she
And end with a monstrous revelation.
head, arms, legs, came off no problem.
June 14th, 2012. It was around 6 p.m. when 31-year-old Rose Chase pulled up outside her mother-in-law's house in Stanley, New York, a tiny village in the Finger Lakes region.
Our area is very rural. It's just a very quiet country little town.
Rose had arrived to pick up her young son. She and the boy's father, 31-year-old Adam Chase, had been married 11 years and had been together since high school.
I remembered them first starting dating like maybe towards the end of his senior year.
Which made what Rose told her mother-in-law, Sylvia, that much more shocking. Not only had the couple had a violent argument,
Adam supposedly punched a hole in the wall.
Rose said that Adam had stormed out of the house.
Walked out. Left his cell phone, his car, everything at home. He didn't take nothing with him.
And according to Rose, he had been gone almost 7 hours.
He said he was walking, and he left the house around 11 o'clock that day.
My mom was asked her, why didn't you call me? We're close. I could have came and talked to him.
Rose said she hadn't thought there was any need at first. Rose told Sylvia that she assumed Adam was just going for a walk to calm down and clear his head.
She said, I figured he'd be home by now.
But after 7 hours with no word from Adam and no way to reach him, the entire family started to worry. Storming off without his phone just wasn't like Adam.
He was always on that thing. You could always get a hold of him no matter what. So him not taking his cell phone was just really bizarre to hear.
Sylvia promised to call as soon as she heard anything. And when Rose left with her son, she said she would do the same. But that night, as she watched Rose drive away, Sylvia had no idea just how many dark and disturbing secrets the search for her son would eventually reveal about her daughter-in-law. Born in 1981 and raised in upstate New York, Rose Mooney had a difficult childhood.
She's pretty much always been an outcast. She had dyslexia. So some of the kids kind of made fun of her when she went to special classes.
Taunted by the other children, Rose became shy and withdrawn, preferring to spend time with her pets rather than kids her own age.
She was thinking about being a veterinarian.
And when Rose's family moved to the remote rural community of Stanley when she was in the 7th grade, she became even more isolated.
She had her animals and mostly kept to herself. She felt like the girl that sat on the sideline.
But that was about to change, thanks to a boy named Adam Chase. 1 year older than Rose, Adam was a popular kid at her school.
Adam was cute. He was handsome.
He was really tall. He was a big guy.
But he was easygoing and approachable.
He was a big teddy bear. He always reached out to people. He could make you feel comfortable within 5 minutes of knowing you.
Partly because, for all his popularity, he had quite a few quirks of his own.
Adam liked swords, Renaissance stuff.
He loved computer games. Actually, computer geek.
And when he first met Rose, he realized that they shared a kindred spirit.
They were into the sci-fi type stuff, and they just had that in common, so they just kind of clicked.
Although at first, their relationship wasn't romantic.
They used to go to like Renaissance festivals and dress up. They kind of went together as friends.
And with Adam to guide her, the shy girl who sat on the sidelines soon learned to embrace and even celebrate the fact that she wasn't like all the other kids.
She always had the crazy hairdos. We never knew what she was doing herself. Makeup or clothing, and she just always made herself stand out.
No one noticed more than Adam. After being friends for several years, he and Rose became a couple.
In high school, they just really started dating.
It had been a long time coming, but it appeared to have been worth the wait.
They seemed like they were very happy together.
They wouldn't be high school sweethearts for long, though. Adam dropped out at the start of his senior year.
Because he missed some gym classes and he wasn't making them up. So he quit, went and got his GED.
Rose, who still struggled with her dyslexia, strongly considered following her boyfriend's example.
She was a whiz in math and science. When it came to English and social studies, she fell behind with the kids.
And according to Rose's mother, Adam encouraged her to drop out, but she wouldn't have it.
Adam wanted her to move in, and I go, when she graduates from school, I don't care what you guys do, but she's going to graduate.
Just as her mother promised, Rose did graduate from high school, but she never pursued her childhood dream of being a veterinarian. Instead, she took an assembly job at a local factory.
She worked all the time, a lot of overtime.
Adam, on the other hand, had a hard time holding down a steady job.
We kind of moved a lot. He was in business mostly. He would sell windows. I think at one point he sold cars.
They weren't making a lot of money, but they had each other. And in June of 2001, when Rose was 19 and Adam had just turned 20, the couple married in true Renaissance fair fashion.
Rose had not your typical wedding dress that you would see these days. It was kind of old-fashioned with a some sort of veil that was like a hat, and it was different.
After the wedding, the couple lived temporarily with Adam's parents.
She was just like family.
I treated her just like a sister.
My parents looked at her like a daughter. I mean, she called them mom and dad.
And thanks to the money Rose and Adam saved by living with mom and dad, the couple soon had enough to buy a place of their own in the neighboring town of Bristol.
It's just the next town over. They did live in Bristol for quite a while.
It was just a trailer, and it was only supposed to be temporary. Rose and Adam planned to start a family, but after several frustrating and fruitless years, their doctors delivered some devastating news.
Adam was told that he had trouble.
It was correctable if they could afford it.
It would cost $10,000, and their insurance did not cover it.
Unable to afford the procedure, Rose and Adam soldiered on, hoping for a miracle. And it looked as if their prayers had finally been answered when 6 years into their marriage, Rose gave birth to a son. And it was tough to say who was happier, Rose or Adam.
He loved being a dad. He would do anything for that little boy.
In fact, once the baby came along, Adam quit his job and became a full-time dad.
Adam was Mr. Mom. He took care of this little boy.
And for the next several years, Rose continued to work.
She was the breadwinner, going out and making sure the family was stable.
And Adam focused on raising their son.
It was Adam giving him breakfast and getting him dressed and all that.
The couple's arrangement appeared to work. Adam bonded with the little boy, who even as a toddler showed a precocious talent for electronics.
Anything on the computer he knew how to do from Adam.
You can type it in. Oh yeah, very computer oriented.
Rose, meanwhile, got promoted at work.
The supervisor described her as being very responsible and very dependable.
In fact, after 12 years together, the couple was doing so well that in 2011 they sold their place in Bristol and bought a bigger house on the outskirts of Stanley.
Adam wanted to move closer to home. We've always been a very close-knit family.
Moving closer to home wasn't the only big change the couple made, however. With their little boy scheduled to start kindergarten in the fall of 2012, Adam began looking for work. And by May, he'd even managed to line up something.
He was being a debt collector for student loans.
A new home, a new job, and their son about to start school. Everything appeared to be going well for Rose and Adam. But less than a month later, Rose would walk into her mother-in-law's house and announce that